I thought the hurricane team would seek revenge sooner, but to my surprise, everything remained eerily quiet for the next 2 days. I had trashed their casino and won a massive amount of supplies. Surely they wouldn't just let that slide. I shook my head. That was impossible. During this time, the military also delivered the diesel I had ordered. All the fuel was pumped directly into the base vehicle's tanks. In its second form as a mining truck, it had a capacity of over 4,000 liters, so the dozen tons of diesel were easily accommodated. With my ammunition replenished and the fuel tanks full, I felt much more at ease. Having rested enough, I planned to pay a visit to the exchange hall. Actually, I didn't care much about military missions, but the rewards were essential for Jiang Chuiying and the others. Moreover, as ability users, we needed constant combat to train and evolve. Otherwise, we would just stagnate. After witnessing that colossal monster at Jinling Port, not just Chuiying, but even I felt a clear sense of threat. If we remained satisfied with our current strength and lived a leisurely life in the Zhonghai area, it would be no different from waiting for death. Against a monster like that, our current power was negligible, hardly enough to get stuck in its teeth. However, before I could even reach the exchange hall, someone came looking for me. When I opened the door and saw 2 soldiers standing outside, I instinctively reached for my waist, on high alert. "Brother Jiang," a familiar voice called out from behind them. Only then did I relax and pull my hand back. It turned out to be Xin Tao. He stepped out from behind the 2 soldiers, his rugged, tanned face wearing a friendly smile. He mentioned he had only tracked down my residence yesterday and got the address today, joking that his efficiency almost caused him to miss me. As he spoke, he shook his head and pulled a small cloth bag from his pocket, handing it to me. I opened it to find 3 crystal-clear, glass-like level 1 mutant crystal cores. I tucked the cores away and smiled, telling him it didn't matter if they were delivered early or late and that there was no need to rush. My impression of Xin Tao was quite good. I felt he was reliable, and I wasn't worried about him pocketing my cores. But Xin Tao immediately shook his head, saying that wouldn't do, then hesitantly asked if I had any plans for the next few days. His intent was obvious. He hadn't just come to deliver the cores today, but also because he needed a favor. I told him to speak plainly. Xin Tao looked around cautiously. Seeing this, I stepped aside and invited him in to talk. The 2 soldiers remained on guard outside the door, not entering. Once inside, Xin Tao got straight to the point. 2 days ago, a team of survivors returned. 7 or 8 members were dead, with only 2 survivors left. They brought news they wanted to trade for supplies. I understood this well. In the military zone, important intel could be exchanged for money or resources, but it had to be verified first. Xin Tao's focus was clearly on that intel. He said the survivor team had been hunting mutant beasts and encountered a monster in a small town. Based on their description, it was very likely a mutant zombie. Hearing the words, mutant zombie, gave me a slight jolt, though I wasn't entirely surprised. Mutant beasts had already appeared, so mutant zombies were only a matter of time. Xin Tao added that mutant zombies weren't non-existent, just very rare, perhaps because the hordes were so massive. I nodded, finding his reasoning sound. When a horde reached tens of thousands, or even millions, a mutant zombie within it would indeed be a tiny target. I was personally very interested in mutant zombies. Hunting mutant beasts had provided the cores needed to upgrade the base vehicle. So, I was curious to see if killing a mutant zombie would yield any benefits for the vehicle. Finally, Xin Tao stated the military's intention. They wanted to organize a hunt for that mutant zombie and asked if I was interested in joining. He guaranteed the pay would be based on the mission's difficulty, ensuring I wouldn't lose out, and noted the military would primarily play a supporting role. More than the pay, what attracted me was the mutant zombie itself. I agreed to participate, but I was clear in my mind. Cooperating with the military didn't mean I would blindly follow their plan. During the operation, I would still make decisions based on my own judgment. Hearing my agreement, Xin Tao looked very pleased, mentioning this mission was quite important and that he wasn't the commander. The higher-ups had sent down someone very formidable. He told me not to call him captain anymore and to just use his name. Then he reminded me to get ready, as we would be departing shortly. I was a bit surprised by the speed, but I quickly nodded. I called Jiang Chuiying and the others, and also invited Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan to come along. The group drove a bus and a refrigerated truck, following Shun Tao's military jeep. In the Zhonghai area, any survivor group wanting to leave the city had to pass through the city gates, and only military vehicles were allowed on these routes. So, seeing a bus and a refrigerated truck trailing a military vehicle, many people turned their heads in curiosity. The military zone stretched across the entire Zhonghai Safety Island, occupying the largest area. My group only went to a supply station, but even this place was a massive barracks. Passing through the checkpoint, I saw countless military vehicles and soldiers moving about. The scene was incredibly busy. At the Zhonghai Sector 1 supply station, one of the main exits from the Zhonghai area, military units departing from Sector 1 were fully supplied here before dispersing to carry out various missions. When I arrived at the assembly point, I immediately noticed a large crowd had already gathered. With just a glance, I saw about 30 regular soldiers, along with quite a few people not in uniform, but carrying military-issued weapons, clearly ability user teams. Looking at the situation, 2 ability teams had arrived first, making ours the third, a force equivalent to a platoon, plus 3 ability teams, just to deal with 1 mutant zombie? I couldn't help but be surprised. This lineup was incredibly powerful. Xin Tao sensed my thoughts and took the initiative to explain that this time, their mission wasn't just to eliminate the mutant zombie, but also to scout an optimal route to Tongnan City. Hearing this, I was even more surprised. Xin Tao continued, saying the High Command of Zhonghai Safety Island was considering clearing the surrounding cities step by step, starting with small towns before moving on to major cities like Jinling or Zhonghai. If this plan succeeded, not just Zhonghai, but the entire surrounding area for several hundred kilometers could be considered a safe zone. I couldn't hide my shock. Was the military planning a counteroffensive? But Xin Tao immediately emphasized that this was only a preliminary plan. Retaking a city occupied by the undead was no simple feat. Currently, Zhonghai Safety Island only had a few tens of thousands of people, with the military numbering less than 10,000. Meanwhile, the number of zombies in many cities reached millions, even tens of millions, not to mention the various mutant beasts. To counterattack, they would have to rely on heavy weaponry and proceed with extreme caution. I frowned and asked if they would use nuclear bombs, a sense of unease rising within me. Xin Tao immediately shook his head, saying many scientists believed nuclear weapons could cause widespread radiation, causing mutant beasts to proliferate even more. It would be like suicide. Although the destructive power of a nuke was terrifying, what truly killed the most people was the long-term radiation. And zombies or mutant beasts weren't particularly afraid of that. Hearing this, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I still remembered the giant water monster lurking in Jinling Port. If such terrifying creatures existed deep within major cities, could even the military hold them off? The safety island only had about 8 or 9,000 soldiers. If losses were too heavy, even holding Zhonghai would become extremely difficult. Just as I was thinking, a coarse voice suddenly rang out, barking at me to get out of the car. A tall, fierce-looking man, carrying a Type 81 rifle, stood right in front of my car door, even banging hard on the glass. I narrowed my eyes. If this weren't the safety island but the wilderness, I might have already drawn my gun. Jiang Chuing tossed her tablet aside, sprang up from the sofa, and barked back without hesitation. Her temper had been fiery since she was a child. One shouldn't be fooled by her cute appearance. The man chuckled, muttered a crude remark, and licked his lips while looking at Chuing, but he didn't go beyond words. I stood up in time and told everyone to get out of the car first. Looking at his attitude, I understood he was just a lackey sent to call us, taking the opportunity to show off. This kind of person would behave once put in their place. Soon, everyone had gathered. 3 ability user teams, plus over 30 soldiers, nearly 60 people in total. Right then, I felt eyes staring intently at me. Turning my head, I saw a burly man with a pale complexion staring at me fixedly. Beside him was a familiar face, the assassin I had met at the casino. I whispered to Xin Tao, asking if that was the Hurricane team, and he nodded in confirmation. Among the 3 ability teams, the Hurricane team was the largest, with about 10 members. When the burly man realized I had recognized them, he smirked with pure malice. I thought to myself, it really is a small world for enemies. Immediately after, 2 military officers stepped forward. One of them was in his 30s, with eyes as sharp as a hawk's, scanning the entire lineup. Xin Tao whispered to me that it was Zhang Jing, the commander of this operation. He was very powerful, had led teams through many difficult missions, and held immense prestige in the military. The other man wore glasses and looked like an office worker, but his aura was cold and his gaze gloomy. He was clearly no simple man. Xin Tao introduced him as Chu Songming, the deputy commander for this mission. After speaking with the other two ability teams, Zhang Jing and Chu Songming walked toward my team. Zhang Jing didn't speak to me directly, but turned to ask Xin Tao if this was the support team he had brought in. Xin Tao stood at attention and answered decisively. I noticed Xin Tao was completely different from his usual relaxed self, looking exactly like a recruit standing before a superior. It was clear how strict Zhang Jing was. Zhang Jing sized up my team. 6 people, not many, and quite a few women. Chu Ying's combat aura was obvious, but Ren Xiu gave him a vague, hard-to-pin-down feeling, so she was almost dismissed as having little combat capability. As for Ying, she looked even more ordinary and was immediately ignored. Their weapons weren't bad overall, but still paled in comparison to the Hurricane team. Zhang Jing's gaze lingered on my vehicle. He clearly thought the most noteworthy thing was the car, though he didn't believe a modified civilian vehicle could be that powerful. Finally, Zhang Jing turned to me, introducing himself as the mission commander. He stated bluntly that he knew ability users were often arrogant because of their skills, but in his team, all arrogance had to be checked at the door. There was only one voice here, and that was his command, which my team was required to follow. Zhang Jing's tone was incredibly stern, so much so that it felt impossible to talk back to him. As a captain, I could understand him saying those things. But I wasn't a soldier, I was there to help. My relationship with the military was a partnership, not a superior subordinate one, so that commanding tone made me frown slightly. Xin Tao stood by, looking visibly awkward. He clearly hadn't expected Zhang Jing to be so blunt right from the start. What are your abilities? Zhang Jing asked coldly. He needed to know my team's capabilities to arrange the tactical plan. Starting with you, he said, pointing directly at Sun Kuan. I thought Zhang Jing would ask me first, but then I realized. In his eyes, I wasn't an ability user, so being ignored was natural. I glanced at Xin Tao, who could only offer a helpless, apologetic smile. My ability is climbing, like a lizard, Sun Kuan replied nonchalantly. Sun Kuan's answer was very dismissive. He couldn't care less about Zhang Jing. The only person Sun Kuan truly respected was me. Next was Jiang Chuying, then the others. In his eyes, even a commander was nothing. Zhang Jing noticed the attitude and frowned, but held back. Accustomed to the yes, commander, style of soldiers, this lazy attitude made him extremely uncomfortable. In truth, Zhang Jing had no liking for ability user teams. In his eyes, they were just a rabble. If not for orders from above, he would never have wanted to cooperate with them. I have some strength in my arms, and I know how to fix cars, Zhang Hai added, his tone not much better than Sun Kuan's. Climbing and fixing cars? Doubt immediately flared in Zhang Jing's mind. What use were these abilities in combat? Fixing cars? Could he even fix an armored vehicle? His expression grew increasingly grim. My mental strength is a bit stronger than average, Ren Xiu said briefly. Ying didn't speak at all. In her eyes, Zhang Jing practically didn't exist. When it was Jiang Chuying's turn, she already disliked Zhang Jing from the start, so she only coldly uttered a single word, without even a hint of further explanation. Zhang Jing's face darkened instantly. Did this team think they were big shots? That's when I spoke up, my voice remaining calm. I emphasized that we weren't soldiers under his command, and that there was no superior-subordinate relationship between us. I told him the military and I were partners. I would try to coordinate with his orders, but if I deemed a decision wrong, I wouldn't follow it. Zhang Jing's aura might intimidate soldiers, but it had no effect on me. A wrong decision? Zhang Jing glared, his voice rising. He thought I was questioning his competence. In his mind, I was too young, just a recruit in the military's eyes. How did I dare speak to a commander like that? People around us began to take notice. The Hurricane team smirked mockingly, clearly enjoying the show. Just as the tension peaked, Chu Songming, standing nearby, spoke up. He emphasized that even in a partnership, Command had to be unified during an operation. Otherwise, conflicting ideas would lead to serious consequences. As he spoke, he pushed up his glasses with a conciliatory smile. Zhang Jing shot Shun Tao a look, clearly blaming him for bringing a team that was both arrogant and lacked strength. Shun Tao sighed inwardly, even risking a breach of discipline to explain that he had personally witnessed my team's combat power and that we were truly strong. He told Zhang Jing not to be fooled by my ordinary appearance, as I also had an ability. Zhang Jing didn't care much when he heard that. What use was such a weak ability? When Shun Tao said my ability was mechanical modification and that I was skilled at building and modifying vehicles, pointing to the bus behind us as an example, Zhang Jing only snorted coldly, asking if I could fix an armored vehicle. The question left Shun Tao completely speechless. In his mind, that was probably impossible. The structure of an armored vehicle was too complex, not something a regular car enthusiast could touch. Chu Songming checked his watch and reminded them it was time to depart. Zhang Jing didn't look at me again as he turned to leave. To him, the mission was starting, and I wasn't worth wasting more time on. Shun Tao whispered to me, telling me not to take it to heart. I just smiled back and said it was fine, but my stance hadn't changed. If the order was wrong, I wouldn't follow it. I knew this demand was challenging a commander's authority, but that was my limit. By now, Zhang Jing had climbed into the armored vehicle, his stern gaze sweeping over the entire formation before he loudly ordered the departure. He waved his hand, and the armored vehicle's engine roared to life as it surged forward. He was always the one leading. Despite his abrasive way of speaking, there was nothing to criticize about his work ethic. In the apocalypse, identity and status no longer mattered. Only strength and the ability to lead a team earned respect. Following the armored vehicle were 3 military trucks, then the ability teams, and finally 2 military vehicles bringing up the rear. The military and ability teams, totaling 15 vehicles, formed a long convoy, kicking up clouds of yellow dust as they left the supply station and Sector 1 of Zhonghai. Every day, countless teams set out from here. Some returned laden with loot, while others never came back. As the convoy passed through the main gates, I saw Jiang Chuing look back. The massive iron gates and the unfinished city walls stretching to the horizon felt like a cold boundary, separating 2 completely different worlds. The Type 92 wheeled infantry fighting vehicle was about 6.6 meters long, with a height and width of around 2.8 meters, weighing 15 tons in combat trim, with a top speed of 85 kilometers per hour. Its primary weapon was a 25 millimeters autocannon, supplemented by a 7.62 millimeters machine gun. Overall, it looked like a miniature version of a tank, except with wheels instead of tracks and an autocannon instead of a large main gun. But even that small caliber had terrifying destructive power. If it hit a human, they would surely be pulverized. Of course, being a miniature version meant its protection was limited. The Type 92 wheeled armored vehicle could only withstand standard rifle rounds. Against anti-material sniper rifles or machine guns using armor-piercing rounds, it would likely be crippled, to say nothing of artillery shells or missiles. Still, against zombies that were still made of human flesh, this vehicle was an absolute lethal predator. In fact, the soldiers of Zhonghai Safety Island were full of confidence about retaking the city, and that confidence came from the weapons they possessed. The heavy weaponry of modern warfare was on a completely different level compared to standard rifles. After the convoy had traveled about 2 kilometers, scattered groups of zombies began to appear ahead. Against these, they didn't even need the autocannon. A soldier standing on the armored vehicle manned the machine gun, and a burst of fire tore them into bloody shreds. The convoy didn't linger, only eliminating those in the way before continuing. Over an hour later, we left the Zhonghai city limits and entered the highway, heading southwest. Tongnan City was over 120 kilometers from Zhonghai. Before the apocalypse, it only took about an hour and a half to drive, but now, for ordinary ability teams, this distance was nearly impassable. For the military, it was different. In Zhang Jing's mind, this wasn't difficult. The armored vehicles were ready, ammunition was plentiful, and many soldiers carried rocket launchers. Ordinary zombies weren't a concern. They just had to watch out for large mutant beasts, which wouldn't be a problem if spotted early. Some mutant beasts could withstand rifle fire, But could they survive an autocannon? We must have traveled about 20 kilometers already. The convoy had hardly stopped. Rinchiu looked at the map on her tablet and spoke. I nodded. Taking the highway was indeed convenient, but I always had a feeling things wouldn't go that smoothly. Otherwise, clearing the path wouldn't be necessary. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, the lead military vehicle turned onto a small path and stopped before a toll booth. After clearing the surrounding zombies, a soldier ran up to report that the highway ahead was completely blocked by abandoned vehicles, forcing them to exit here. The road ahead hadn't been cleared, and its condition was entirely unknown. Zhang Jing nodded and immediately issued orders. The armored vehicle would lead, the Hurricane team on the left, and the Longyue team on the right would handle security and support. My team, Team Shadow, was assigned to assist the engineers in clearing obstacles. He emphasized that everyone had to stay highly focused and not make even the smallest mistake. The order was barely out when Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan in the back lost their tempers, cursing that Zhang Jing was treating us like garbage collectors. Just then, an exaggerated voice rang out, laced with mockery. I looked up to see 4 vehicles from the front of the convoy moving to the left. One of them intentionally swerved close to Zhang Hai's vehicle, forcing him to pull his head back. The speaker was the crude man who had teased Jiang Chuing earlier. It turned out he belonged to the Hurricane team. He stopped his car, looked at Zhang Hai through the window, and sneered, telling him to save his strength for pushing abandoned cars. The other 3 cars didn't move up, but the people inside were all watching with mocking grins. It was a blatant provocation. I had caused their casino heavy losses before, and the money I took had left them in a deep hole. Now that they had the chance, how could they let it go? This was just the beginning. If they got the chance during the mission, they surely wanted to crush my team. But right then, the roar of an engine erupted. The man turned his head, horrified to see my bus charging straight at his car with insane speed, like a massive cannonball. His heart nearly stopped, his face turning pale. The bus only stopped when it was inches from his car, but it still slammed hard into the rear. A jarring crash echoed as the SUV was jolted forward, its tires screeching against the pavement. The man almost smashed his head against the dashboard, only managing to keep his balance thanks to his ability, but the rear of the car was heavily deformed and the back window shattered. His whole body went rigid, his limbs cold. He glared at me in pure rage, but when he looked at my bus, he froze. The front of my car didn't have a single scratch, not even a crack in the glass. I nonchalantly apologized, claiming my foot slipped and I hit the gas instead of the brake, then complained about the poor design of having both pedals used by the same foot. After that, I handed the wheel over to Ing. The man watched blankly as I gave the controls to a woman with a smoking hot body, likely thinking a girl like her would struggle with a car, let alone a bus. All the curses he had ready were swallowed back down. What if she hit the gas by mistake too? Besides, why was this bus so damn sturdy? He backed his car toward mine, jumped out, and screamed for me to get down, while drawing his gun and pointing it straight at the windshield. My gaze turned cold, and Ing beside me already had her 3-edged military dagger gripped tight. No matter the circumstances, I didn't like having a gun pointed at me, even with the base vehicle's bulletproof glass between us. As for Ing, it went without saying. As my loyal bodyguard, seeing this made her killing intent flare up instantly. She didn't care if the military was around. If anyone threatened my safety, she wouldn't hesitate to kill them. What the hell are you people doing? Zhang Jing barked in anger. As a soldier, he was used to there being only one voice in a team. He was used to everyone obeying orders absolutely, with the only answers being, yes, sir, or sorry, sir. But today he felt like he was commanding a rabble. No strength, no discipline, and everyone thinking they were a big shot. The sound of bolts racking echoed as several black muzzles were simultaneously aimed at the man who was losing his mind. Put the gun down. Under that pressure, no matter how angry he was, he could only grit his teeth and lower his weapon. All the members of the Hurricane team jumped out of their cars now. Their car was wrecked, and they couldn't even get justice. How could they swallow this? Zhang Jing turned and pointed directly at me. Get out of the car. At the same time, the rifles of the soldiers under his command were aimed at me and Ing. I frowned slightly. In a situation with so many guns pointed at me, stepping out of the car went entirely against my principles. Commander Zhang, I said calmly, I'm very sorry about what just happened, but it's clear someone else provoked us first. I reminded him again that I wasn't his soldier. I would coordinate with his orders, but not all of them. For example, right now, if you tell me to get out of the car, I won't listen, I said, my voice steady. I knew Zhang Jing had a grudge against my team, from assigning us to clear obstacles to his attitude just now. It was all somewhat targeted. But at the end of the day, he was still a soldier. That way of thinking and those habits were understandable. In the military, recruits who didn't follow orders were broken and hard. Zhang Jing was used to that environment. His mindset couldn't change overnight. I understood, but it didn't mean I would submit. I only did what I needed to do and received the pay I deserved for my efforts. I'd do the work, I'd get the pay. It was that simple. I raised my hands in a gesture of peace, sitting calmly in the base vehicle, not worried about being shot. But I was also very clear. Once the other side fired, this cooperation would end, and it might even turn into a real battle. Work for pay. You're certainly arrogant, Zhang Jing hissed. As he spoke, a sudden sense of unease washed over him, and he whipped his head around. At that exact moment, a black shadow plummeted from above, accompanied by a faint whistling sound tearing through the air. Watch out, someone screamed. Zhang Jing reacted incredibly fast, diving to the side. A dull explosion echoed as the black shadow pierced right through the SUV I had just rammed. The car windows shattered, spraying glass everywhere. The object pierced through the headrest and flew out the other side. The sudden explosion made everyone draw their guns and scramble for cover. The man looked at his car, a chill running down his spine. Is that? Someone cried out in fear. A steel rebar. Yes, it was a length of rebar. No gun could fire a rebar like a bullet. That thing could only have been thrown by a person. The same thought immediately flashed through everyone's mind. An ability user ambush. But a moment later, they realized they were wrong. Through the roadside bushes, a swarm of black shadows was approaching. Their clothes were tattered and filthy, their movements slow, but their direction was unmistakably clear. They were all heading straight for us. The feeling they gave off was like demons crawling out of hell, a silent, oppressive aura that made one's skin crawl. Are they human, or? Zhang Jing focused his mind. The distance was several hundred meters, and the trees were in the way. He couldn't tell for sure at first. Zombies, I stated firmly. After my bloodline evolved, my vision was much stronger, enough to see more clearly than an ordinary person. Zombies. Zhang Jing was shocked. These zombies were completely different from any he had encountered. Ordinary zombies were sensitive to sound and smell, but had poor vision. They rarely targeted something from a distance. But these were different. They appeared suddenly with a clear objective. A soldier also noticed they were all holding something, mostly black plates. Steel plates, I continued, and rebars. The distance was still far, so the rebars were hard to see, but when the soldier confirmed it with binoculars, Zhang Jing's face darkened instantly. Plates and rebars were common materials in steel mills. This meant these zombies had been to a factory, and more importantly, they were using weapons. Prepare for combat. Zhang Jing barked, jumping onto the off-road vehicle. Tension filled the air. Even the seasoned soldiers couldn't hide their anxiety. Just then, another rebar whistled through the air. Thud! It slammed into a military vehicle. Luckily, the soldier inside ducked in time, and only the windshield was smashed. A zombie could throw a rebar weighing several kilograms hundreds of meters with such precision, even through the tree cover. The thought of mutant zombies flashed through my mind, sending a chill down my spine. I had imagined many forms of mutant zombies, but I never thought I'd see the day they used weapons, or even had the ability to lead and gather their own kind. Fire! Zhang Jing roared. Even though visibility was limited and the distance was still great, he didn't dare hesitate. But as the first volley of gunfire rang out, the lead zombies simultaneously retreated behind their steel plates, using them to block the incoming bullets. The bullets clattered against the steel plates in a rapid rhythm, sparks flying into the air. The sight left everyone stunned, nearly unable to believe their eyes. In most people's minds, zombies were terrifying monsters with strength and speed far beyond humans. But for ability users, their greatest advantage had always been their numbers. Despite their incredible physical power, ordinary zombies didn't know how to use it, only charging into muzzles without fear. When hundreds of thousands, or even millions gathered, no team dared to get close. But if the numbers weren't too high, powerful ability teams still dared to challenge them. For strong teams, a small group of zombies was almost never a serious threat. However, what we were witnessing now was entirely different. These zombies didn't just know how to use weapons, they knew how to defend. That meant they had intelligence. Their orderly movements and coordination were no different from a real army. The scene before us completely overturned everyone's previous understanding of zombies. Immediately after, low, guttural growls erupted from behind the steel plates, and the zombies charged forward in unison. The sound of heavy footsteps mingled with the rapid heartbeats of the humans, and the ground began to tremble slightly. Zhang Jing watched this in horror, with only one thought in his mind. Just how terrifying is this power? Ready the autocannon. Everyone, battle stations. Zhang Jing shouted his orders. Despite the shock, he remained calm. Orders were issued in rapid succession. The military quickly formed a battle line, and the gun muzzles intersected to create a dense web of fire. The Hurricane team, who had just stepped out of their cars, also turned pale and scrambled back to their combat positions. At this moment, they didn't have the mind to care about Team Shadow anymore. I also realized that there were likely mutant zombies among them, and the others surely thought so too. Mutant zombies were one of the primary objectives of this mission. Hunting one would bring a massive reward. Doing it alone would be difficult, but with the military's heavy fire support, it was worth a shot. I saw the ability team's vehicles start up one by one, engines roaring, but I didn't rush to act. Despite the military's heavy firepower, I noticed the rifle rounds hitting the steel plates were barely slowing the zombies down. A few fell, but many more kept closing in. I frowned, my eyes gradually brightening. The Type 81 rifle used 7.62 mm rounds, which could penetrate about 0.6 centimeters of steel at 100 meters. This proved the steel plates the zombies were holding were at least that thick, if not more. A normal person couldn't hold a heavy plate to cover their body while running fast, but zombies could. They were fully exploiting their physical advantages. Just then, the autocannon on the armored vehicle roared, with continuous explosions echoing. The shells were fired, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. A steel plate could stop a rifle bullet, but it was completely useless against an autocannon. Someone swallowed hard, muttering that these zombies weren't so tough after all. However, Zhang Jing's expression didn't lighten. If anything, it grew gloomier. The zombies were too spread out for the autocannon to be fully effective, and the ammunition was limited. Many, even after being hit and covered in blood with limbs blown off, still staggered back up to continue their advance. As long as they weren't completely dead, zombies could still move. 100 meters, at their speed, was just a blink of an eye. Asterisk. The first zombies burst out of the bushes. One swung a steel plate with immense force, and it flew nearly 100 meters, slamming into the side of a military vehicle and leaving a horrific dent. The plate was over a centimeter thick and riddled with bullet marks. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. If that thing hit a person, they'd be crushed into bloody pulp. Right then, a loud explosion rang out as a shoulder-fired rocket was launched. At such close range, the shockwave was clearly felt, and the zombies that had just charged were blown into a mist of bone and blood. A few ability users couldn't help but grin with excitement, but Shen Tao knew better. That was an 89mm Type 80 rocket launcher, a single-use weapon. The whole team only carried 10, and they had already used one. Meanwhile, the damage to the zombie horde was still too little. The military's heavy fire gave the ability teams more confidence. The roar of engines came from the flanks as the Longhua team began their move. They fired rapidly while moving, and one of them threw a long chain with sharp steel claws attached. The claws looped over a steel plate and instantly crushed a zombie's head. That was the captain of the Longhua team. His movements were incredibly fast. In just a moment, 2 cars had circled the horde, killing over a dozen zombies. Well done. Zhang Jing's eyes lit up. He hadn't expected much from the ability teams, but he now realized their value. Though they couldn't match an autocannon, their flexibility and ambush capabilities were extremely effective. Seeing the Longhua team's success, the Hurricane team's captain, Bai Jingchong, roared that whoever killed a mutant zombie would be heavily rewarded. Upon hearing the order, the Hurricane team members cheered and revved their engines, charging straight ahead. Their vehicles coordinated perfectly, each launching long steel spears. The throwers were muscular ability users with animalistic fur growing on them. Each spear flew dozens of meters, piercing through zombie heads and pinning them to the ground. The Hurricane team captain also charged in, but instead of throwing spears, he directly hoisted a zombie and threw it with immense force into the crowd behind it. The horrific throw sent the zombie flying, crushing several of its kind. The scene was both violent and terrifying. However, the tense atmosphere didn't fade. Even though the military and ability teams were working well together and had gained initial victories, the number of zombies continued to grow and advance at a terrifying speed. Clearly, what we were facing was no longer an ordinary zombie horde, but an organized force with tactics and a danger level far beyond imagination. This battle was far from over. The spears were 7 or 8 meters long, and after piercing through a zombie, the heavy tip would slam into the ground. The momentum was so great that the entire spear would bend. The fact that Bai Zhengchong could complete such a throw showed how terrifying his strength was. After that throw, he flexed his arms, and the rest of the Hurricane team immediately cheered in excitement, their morale soaring. Having finished a round of attacks, Bai Zhengchong glanced toward me. 2 ability teams had already acted, while my bus and refrigerated truck remained stationary, not moving an inch. Bai Zhengchong let out a cold smirk. My bus was too bulky, and the refrigerated truck wasn't a nimble SUV. Facing this situation, in his eyes, we probably didn't know what to do. But even if we didn't, we could at least fire a few shots for show. Why just sit there? All that boasting from before, were we just going to eat our words now? Although the Hurricane and manhwa teams only made quick passes, killing a few zombies before immediately retreating. They didn't dare stay long, but compared to my total inaction, they felt vastly superior. That comparison made them even more confident, highlighting the so-called gap between elite teams and ordinary ones. They were the elite, and my team was, well, no need to say it. Brother Jiang, what do we do now? Zhang Hai drove up beside the bus and asked in a low voice. I glanced at the Hurricane team and replied calmly, wait a bit longer. I didn't care much for the manhwa and Hurricane team's hit-and-run tactics. How many zombies could they really kill that way? Those shouts and displays of power didn't affect me at all. Brother Jiang, there's a very special light among those zombies, but it's constantly moving, Ren Xiu suddenly spoke up. Thanks to her energy vision, she could see things invisible to the naked eye. Hearing that, I immediately looked toward the horde, my heart stirring. So there really was a mutant zombie. But besides that point, there were several others, just weaker. Ren Xiu paused for a moment before continuing. There are several points. I was a bit surprised. Could there be several mutant zombies in this horde? I can't get an exact count. They're moving very fast, Ren Xiu frowned, clearly finding it difficult to distinguish them. Keep a close eye on those points, I said. She nodded in response. Immediately after, I stepped on the gas and drove toward a military vehicle. Hey, do you have a sniper rifle? I asked Shin Tao. He was sitting in the military vehicle, next to a young officer who was driving. When he saw the bus approaching, the young officer was a bit surprised. A young survivor, looking 7 or 8 years younger than him, was asking for a sniper rifle. In his mind, becoming a sniper required at least 2 or 3 years of training and tens of thousands of rounds. A sniper rifle was absolutely not something just anyone could use. Even he, though confident in his marksmanship, knew he was far from proficient enough to handle such a weapon. As for me, I had clearly only learned to use guns after the apocalypse, yet I wanted a sniper rifle. Brother Jiang, you need one? I don't have one, but if you need it, I'll go borrow one, Shin Tao asked in surprise. Yeah, help me borrow one, I replied briefly. Shin Tao called someone over. Not long after, a soldier in camouflage fatigues came over, crouching low, carrying a sniper rifle. An AMR. This thing is a treasure. The soldier wasn't very happy as he handed the rifle through the car window to me. I took it, and the heavy weight was felt instantly. This gun was indeed very heavy. Just holding it, you could feel its power. The barrel alone was nearly a meter long. The body was polished and well-maintained, clearly a weapon the soldier prized highly. No wonder he was reluctant to lend it. To him, Handing this rifle to an amateur like me was something he really didn't want to do. If not for orders from above, he might have refused outright. AM 2.50 caliber. It uses the same 12.7 by 108 mm rounds as a heavy machine gun. Its penetration and power are immense, with an effective range of about 1.5 kilometers, Shin Tao explained. I nodded in satisfaction. Range wasn't my concern. What I needed was penetration and lethality. Have you ever used a sniper rifle before? The young officer finally couldn't help but ask. The way I looked at the rifle made him feel like I was touching one for the first time. Even though he knew I was invited by Shin Tao, he couldn't help but be skeptical. I shook my head calmly. No, this is the first time. But this one looks pretty good. It should be easy to use. The air immediately fell silent. Both the young officer and the soldier were speechless. The soldier grew even more anxious, looking at Shin Tao with an uneasy gaze, deeply regretting lending the rifle. The young officer looked at Shin Tao with pity, thinking to himself that after this mission, Shin Tao would likely face a harsh reprimand. With Zhang Jing's personality, he would definitely be chewed out. And Bai Jingchong might look kind on the surface, but he was actually even more ruthless. If a mistake happened under his watch, Shin Tao wouldn't know how he'd be tormented. Just then, a whistling sound tore through the air. A long steel rebar suddenly flew out, piercing through a Longyue team vehicle with a jarring crash. Even though the Longyue team had been extremely careful, always moving under military fire support and at high speeds. But that rebar seemed to have calculated the trajectory perfectly, hitting the side of the car flawlessly. The horrific penetration force caused the body to be pierced, and blood sprayed onto the ground. The car still surged forward, crashing through the highway guardrail and flipping into the bushes. A plume of black smoke rose. The Longyue team captain witnessed this, his eyes instantly turning bloodshot, his heart roaring with rage. The zombie capable of throwing steel was hiding among the horde, holding that steel plate and waiting for its chance. One strike had destroyed a vehicle. Who would dare advance now? Immediately after, another whistle sounded, and another rebar pierced the body of a military vehicle. Even though it only hit the body, it was enough to make everyone's expression change. It turned out there wasn't just one zombie with the ability to throw steel. Zhang Jing's expression became extremely grim. Besides the threat from the rebar-throwing zombies, he also noticed the number of zombies holding steel plates was decreasing very slowly. The autocannon had immense firepower, but it couldn't stop the zombies that were continuously pouring in from all sides. If this continued, their advantage would gradually be eroded. Something is summoning them, Zhang Jing suddenly said. If such a thing truly existed, a mutant zombie summoning and commanding ordinary zombies to use weapons and attack the military, then its danger level was truly terrifying. It could already command hundreds. Could it command tens of thousands? If millions of zombies in the city were summoned, coordinated, and even given a bit of intelligence, the scene would be horrific. Just thinking about it made Zhang Jing feel a chill down his spine. The Hurricane and Longyue teams also quickly realized this anomaly, especially the Longyue team. After losing a vehicle, they began to consider retreating. Continuing to fight here, we're at a disadvantage. Visibility is limited, we can't see the zombies clearly. Only the autocannon can pierce the steel plates. Most rifle rounds are being blocked. It's best to retreat a bit, the Longyue team captain shouted loudly. Zhang Jing looked at the survivors around him, a hint of hesitation in his heart. Retreating now was also very dangerous, but if they didn't get out before being surrounded, it was the most logical choice. However, if they retreated now, this battle would be for nothing. When they came back to find the mutant zombie, the horde scale might be even larger. The ability teams all turned their eyes toward Zhang Jing, waiting to see what decision he would make. Zhang Jing took a deep breath. He already had the answer. No matter how strong the autocannon was, ammunition was limited. They couldn't face such a massive horde for long. Even if retreating after encountering a mutant zombie might affect the military's honor, in the apocalypse, survival was what mattered most. Moreover, he had to report this information back to headquarters to adjust their strategy. If both Central Zhonghai and Jinling had mutant zombies, then the military's entry would become extremely difficult. Just as Zhang Jing was about to order a retreat, suddenly, boom, a loud explosion rang out from behind, making everyone turn their heads. The scene before them left everyone stunned. The highway toll booth in the distance, its entire steel frame and roof, had suddenly collapsed, blocking the highway and sealing the exit. Damn it! Zhang Jing's eyes were bloodshot. He didn't have time to think about why that heavy steel frame had collapsed. He only saw the scattered zombies quickly gathering toward the toll booth. If this continued, they would be completely surrounded. Once the circle closed, there would only be one outcome: a gruesome death. They had to break the encirclement before it closed. But if they turned back, whether to turn the vehicles around or bypass the collapsed toll booth, it would take too much time, and that was surely a path to death. All units, hear my command. Charge! Zhang Jing grabbed a heavy machine gun and stood up from the armored vehicle, shouting while firing. Retreating was impossible. To temporarily escape the encirclement, they had to charge straight ahead. As the command and primary combat vehicle, even knowing the zombies could throw steel, Zhang Jing was forced to stand up to get a wider view. If he only observed through the periscope and small windows, how could he grasp the overall situation? At the same time as Zhang Jing, another officer also stood up, his eyes suddenly becoming as sharp as a beast's, his pupils constricting like needles as he intently watched the surroundings. Zhang Jing understood that charging ahead also meant facing greater danger, perhaps even total annihilation. However, as soon as the order was given, one vehicle in the convoy didn't follow the formation but suddenly veered off the main road. Vroom! The engine roared like a beast as the vehicle spun around and accelerated toward the flank of the zombie horde. It was my bus. Zhang Jing was stunned, a single thought flashing through his mind. Have they lost their minds? Charging into the zombie horde at a time like this was no different from suicide. Those zombies were holding steel plates. With their terrifying strength, they only needed to use those heavy plates to brace for the impact. Once the vehicle pushed through 4 or 5 layers of zombies, it would get stuck like it was in quicksand. Unable to move, that was a death sentence. Not just Zhang Jing, but many others saw this too. Everyone was bewildered, completely unable to understand what I was thinking. The zombies were about to surround us. Everyone was trying to run, yet I was charging right into the middle. Just then, the base vehicle emitted a series of metallic clacks. The roof began to split open, and a hemispherical metal ring slowly rose. It looked like a flying saucer, exuding a sense of future technology. Everyone was amazed. Modified cars weren't rare since the apocalypse, from engine upgrades to welding on steel plates or wrapping tires in iron mesh. All sorts of styles existed, but a modification like this was something even Zhang Jing had never seen. Was this a sci-fi movie? The gun. Zhang Jing immediately noticed a gun protruding from that saucer. That thing turned out to be a mobile turret. An AM-2 sniper rifle? With a soldier's eye, Zhang Jing was so familiar with guns that he could recognize them at a glance. A bus with a turret was unbelievable enough, but a turret equipped with a sniper rifle was even weirder. In his mind, turrets were mainly for suppressive fire, which usually required a heavy machine gun. Using a sniper rifle in a turret was strange enough, let alone the fact that I was the one operating it. Zhang Jing didn't believe for a second that an ordinary civilian from before the apocalypse, who might have never even touched a gun, could use a sniper rifle. Even if I had played with air rifles at a carnival before, how could an outsider who didn't know how to use an optical scope operate this kind of weapon? That idiot. Suppressive fire. Zhang Jing roared. Even though he didn't understand what I was doing, charging into the horde like that was clearly seeking death, and he couldn't just stand by and watch. Relying on the military's firepower, even if he couldn't save me, he could at least buy more time for the convoy to retreat. But looking at the ammunition being consumed at a staggering rate, Zhang Jing couldn't help but feel the sting. Once the machine guns opened up, bullets were spent like water. In an isolated situation like this, once they ran out of ammo, death would come instantly. Right then, a jarring whistle tore through the air. Zhang Jing felt his scalp go numb, instinctively realizing something was flying straight at him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a black shadow flash past. It was steel, a rebar as thick as a thumb and about 70 or 80 centimeters long. It pierced through the branches and charged straight ahead. The target was Zhang Jing. The zombies had intelligence. They knew how to distinguish who the commander of the formation was. At this moment, Zhang Jing no longer had the mind to worry about me. He let out a roar and suddenly lunged outward. His muscles bulged violently, his uniform stretching to the point of tearing. His arms were nearly as thick as an average person's thigh. His eyes were wide as he swung both hands to meet the incoming rebar head-on. Bai Zhengchong and the others watched, a chill running down their spines. The rebar was flying at a terrifying speed, but Zhang Jing's explosive power was no less impressive. All eyes were on him. At that exact moment, amidst the heavy gunfire, a boom rang out, not particularly loud. Zhang Jing's hands slammed into the rebar. The moment they made contact, his arms went numb and his palms stung with sharp pain. Looking down, his hands were already covered in blood. The rebar was knocked off course, but it still grazed the tail of the armored vehicle, sending out a shower of sparks. It continued forward, piercing through the concrete highway barrier, shattering a large chunk before burying itself deep in the bushes, disappearing from sight. That destructive power made everyone shudder. No one knew how many more rebars those zombies had, but if this continued, someone would eventually get hurt. Zhang Jing's limbs ached, but his head ached even more. Suddenly, he heard an excited shout. A hit! Fury immediately flared up in Zhang Jing's heart. His hands were badly injured from blocking a rebar, and someone was shouting about a hit? But when he turned around, he was stunned to find the one shouting was the officer beside him. It was Eagle, an observation ability user with an incredible field of vision, nearly 180 degrees. Although his combat ability wasn't high, he was a vital link in the team. Eagle didn't look at Zhang Jing but kept his eyes on the distance, shouting, "Commander Zhang, the zombie that just threw the rebar has been hit." Zhang Jing froze, immediately looking toward the horde ahead, but the density was too great. Even with binoculars, his vision was severely blocked. However, he knew Eagle wouldn't just shout for no reason. But zombies had incredible resilience. If you didn't hit the head or heart, it was hard to kill them, only wound them. Zhang Jing instinctively assumed it was the result of continuous suppressive fire. Although the zombies knew how to use steel plates for defense, the plates didn't fit together perfectly. It was very likely a bullet had slipped through a gap and hit the target. "Keep up the suppressive fire," Zhang Jing roared. Even if they didn't kill that rebar-throwing zombie immediately, continuous fire would eventually take it down. As long as it died, the horde would fall apart. No, Eagle interrupted him. That zombie's head was blown off. Its head just exploded. Zhang Jing was stunned. How could it be such a coincidence? That rebar-throwing zombie was clearly hiding among the horde. How could it have been shot in the head? At this moment, Eagle licked his lips and said slowly, "Commander Zhang, I suspect that shot just now came from Team Shadow." His eyes were fixed on my bus, which had now separated from the main formation. Just a moment ago, the AM-2 on the roof had spat out a long spark. In the chaos, even a sniper shot wasn't too prominent, but the coincidence between the shot and the zombie's head exploding was too clear. "What did you say?" Zhang Jing's eyes widened. "Are you sure you didn't see wrong?" Eagle shook his head. "I didn't see the bullet's path, so I can't be absolutely certain." Zhang Jing looked back at the turret on the bus roof. In this situation, could someone touching a sniper rifle for the first time really blow off the head of a rebar-throwing zombie? With his years of military experience, he knew the probability of that was lower than being struck by lightning. My bus had already plunged deep into the horde. Despite the military's fire support, several zombies holding steel plates still managed to close in on the bus. One of them suddenly raised a steel plate and threw it with force at the bus. At that exact moment, the sizzle of electricity rang out, and a blue-white electrical light erupted, engulfing the surrounding zombies. Since they were holding steel, the conductivity was even more pronounced. However, the plate that had just been thrown still slammed heavily onto the roof, creating a bone-chilling thud. Right then, in the combat zone on the roof, I was intensely focused, my eyes locked onto the gun barrel. "Left, 7 o'clock. Ren Shiyu's voice came from below. I immediately swiveled the barrel. In my overclocked brain state, the fast-moving zombies suddenly seemed to slow down in my eyes. Amidst the dense horde, I saw one holding a rebar just as it sprang into the air. That's the one. The moment I locked onto the target, I pulled the trigger. The AM-2 on the roof spat out another fierce flash of fire. At the same time, from within the bushes, another rebar whistled out. Everyone was on high alert, but unexpectedly, that rebar flew much weaker than before. Before it could even reach us, it lost momentum, fell to the ground, bounced a few times, and lay still. What happened? Did the zombie miss? Impossible. Once a zombie attacked, it was always with precision and brutality. They only lost their strength when they died. There was no such thing as suddenly becoming weak. That's why zombies were always such difficult enemies to face, with their terrifying explosive power and nearly infinite stamina. Just then, Eagle shouted again, another headshot. This time he saw it very clearly. At the exact moment the AM-2 fired, the rebar-throwing zombie's head was blown apart. Once could be a coincidence, but twice in a row was absolutely not an accident. No matter how hard it was to believe, Eagle was forced to conclude it was Team Shadow's shot. Looking at the turret on the bus roof, he almost couldn't believe his eyes. The second zombie had been sniped the moment it showed its head. Even with his superior observation skills, Eagle only managed to see the rebar-throwing zombie the moment it was taken down. In such a chaotic situation, amidst countless zombies and obstacles, how did the shooter manage to aim with such precision? Having taken down 2 rebar-throwing zombies, my expression remained unchanged. My eyes were intensely focused, my finger steady on the trigger. After my blood evolved, my brain's capacity had also been enhanced. Without this evolution, identifying a specific rebar-throwing zombie amidst the dense horde, then completing the sequence of swiveling, aiming, and firing in a split second would have been nearly impossible. Even though it was just one shot, it utilized the full extent of my evolved body's capabilities. That's why Zhang Jing and Eagle found it so hard to believe. Even for me before the evolution, this would have been too difficult, let alone for an outsider. Even legendary snipers might not have been able to do this. After taking down the 2 rebar-throwing zombies, the system still hadn't notified me of a mutant zombie kill. Maybe those weren't mutant zombies. Ying's voice rang in my ear. I nodded, having already suspected as much. Having 4 or 5 mutant zombies appear at once was too illogical. But they're definitely related to mutant zombies, or they're individuals in the process of evolving, not yet fully mutated, I reasoned. Under Ying's control, the bus moved with incredible agility, coordinating perfectly with the military's fire support. Initially, that support was just to help us escape the encirclement, but now it was different. Zhang Jing hesitated for a moment, then shouted, "Continue to support Team Shadow." Bai Zhengchong frowned. He certainly didn't want to provide cover fire for me. In fact, he still doubted that I had actually sniped the rebar-throwing zombies. From his perspective, he naturally didn't want to believe it. It was better if that officer had just seen wrong. Amidst the heavy gunfire, the bus charged into the horde like a fierce tiger, tearing a path through. I didn't even glance at the zombies holding steel plates charging at us. I only waited for Rin Shiyu's signal. She stared intently ahead, her gray eyes holding a strange mystery, her pupils seemingly reflecting things others couldn't see. Locking onto a target amidst countless light points was no small challenge for her. Right? 3 o'clock, her voice rang out. Boom. Following the shot, the light point immediately vanished. Rin Shiyu's pupils constricted. It was too fast. The moment she finished speaking, the target was down. It was an incredibly precise shot. Eagle took a sharp breath. This was the third one. Every single one was a headshot. The rounds from the sniper rifle carried terrifying destructive power. The zombie heads exploded like watermelons upon impact. It was a gruesome sight. In Eagle's eyes, it was a blooming flower of blood, a blindingly bright red. Zhang Jing had been using binoculars to observe, but his vision was too limited. He only saw the flash from the roof turret, but he couldn't determine which rebar-throwing zombie had been taken down. Damn it! Zhang Jing lowered his binoculars in frustration, annoyed by his helplessness. But his gaze toward my bus grew more and more astonished. Even with all his focus, he couldn't find the targets, yet I was able to blow their heads off. He has a girl with mental abilities on his bus. Could it be her? Zhang Jing suddenly remembered the earlier introduction. Initially, he had almost ignored Rin Shiyu, but now it was different. Using mental abilities to lock onto targets while I handled the shooting. If they coordinated perfectly, it was indeed possible. But that meant I didn't just need to be a good shot. I needed reflexes that were borderline absurd. What kind of reflexes was I showing? The reflexes of a god. If he hadn't personally seen me modifying the bus, Zhang Jing might have thought my ability was related to marksmanship. Bai Zhengcheng's face was now extremely grim. 3 times in a row, no matter how much he didn't want to believe it, he had to accept the truth. Damn it, I was a terrifying marksman. Whether through practice or natural talent, I was absolutely not the useless person he had thought. A grudge had already formed between the Hurricane team and Team Shadow. Seeing an opponent he thought he could easily crush suddenly reveal such power. How could he be in a good mood? Meanwhile, the bus had reached the edge of the forest. Damn it, Zhang Hai roared, slamming his foot on the gas. The engine roared, and the refrigerated truck behind spat out a cloud of black smoke, closely following the bus and charging into the horde. The 2 vehicles, one after the other, surged forward with pure aggression, seemingly unstoppable. Earlier, when the zombies kept appearing, Zhang Jing had considered retreating. The pressure weighed heavily on everyone. But now, Team Shadow's breakthrough had completely changed the morale of the entire battle line. The refrigerated truck followed closely behind, with angry shouts echoing from within. Though not as synchronized or flamboyant as the Hurricane team earlier, it felt more authentic. Zhang Hai roared, "Come and bite me, you bastards." It was blunt, even vulgar, but it made the surrounding soldiers feel their blood boil. Just 3 shots, just 3 rebar-throwing zombies down, yet the atmosphere on the battlefield was entirely different. The soldiers who were previously weighed down by pressure were now full of fighting spirit. A soldier roared, the machine gun in his hand spitting out a fierce stream of fire. "I'm human. You zombies are nothing." Without needing Zhang Jing's order, the soldiers automatically provided cover for Team Shadow. Even the Longyue team captain, after a moment of hesitation, shouted, "Damn it, fire! Fire to avenge our brothers." As soon as the order was given, the members immediately climbed out of the sunroofs, and the machine guns on the SUVs roared fiercely. Even though they were just fighting together for survival, hearing the word brothers seemed to create a real bond between them. The bullets fired carried all their rage, fear, and previous retreats. "What do we do now?" the man who had almost been hit by my car asked. Bai Jingchong shot him a cold look, his eyes full of annoyance. "With all those guns firing, what else is there to do?" he replied in a freezing tone. His mood was at an absolute low. By now, my 2 vehicles had completely reached the edge of the forest. At such close range, even the Longyue or Hurricane teams wouldn't have dared to approach during their attacks. Not just because of the zombies with steel plates, but because of the lethal threat from the rebar-throwing zombies. Even so, the Longyue team had already been hit. But it was different for my team, because my goal from the start had been to eliminate those rebar-throwing zombies, and we had succeeded. Any that showed themselves were immediately taken down. Just then, dozens of zombies holding steel plates suddenly rushed out of the forest. Given the large size of the bus, many of them fell right into the blind spots of the fire support. Earlier, while the bus was still accelerating, the cover fire had been extremely effective. But now, as the bus began to slow down and approach the forest, the number of zombies in front of it grew even larger. These zombies held their steel plates high, charging out of the forest like madmen. Even if they were shot down, others rushed forward without hesitation. Seeing the 2 vehicles close in, the horde became even more aggressive. Under the cover of the steel plates, the growls and the occasionally visible crazed eyes made Ren Xiu feel her whole body go rigid. The distance was constantly shrinking, while the bus was slowing down, as if falling into quicksand. Ren Xiu looked up at the roof, took a deep breath, and forced herself to stay calm. She ignored the zombies charging at the windshield and continued to search for unusual light points within the horde. "Their situation doesn't look good," a man suddenly said with a gleeful tone. He was the one I had almost run over earlier. Even though he had been scolded by Bai Zhengchong for talking nonsense, he never had any intention of helping me. Now, seeing Team Shadow in danger, he was even more delighted. Bai Zhengchong only shot him a glance and said coldly, "Get lost." The man's babbling was making him extremely annoyed. He even regretted letting the guy into the car after the other one was pierced by a rebar. Bai Zhengchong also saw that Team Shadow was showing signs of getting bogged down, but he didn't want us to be wiped out immediately. It was better if we could hold out a bit longer, taking down a few more zombies, especially the rebar throwers, with us. That would be considered making use of our final value. These zombies clearly had higher intelligence than normal. One part split off to draw the military's fire, while the rest concentrated their full force on us. As they closed in, they suddenly accelerated. Though their numbers weren't massive, when they simultaneously raised those heavy steel plates, the situation changed instantly. The weight and force of their charge made their footsteps sound like a thundering cavalry. Their goal was very clear: smash the lead bus. "Get out of the way," someone from the military side shouted. "Get out of the way? How?" Bai Jingchong sneered. Even he would have flinched at this charge. At that exact moment, the bus engine roared violently. Sizzle. Arcs of electricity began to cover the vehicle's body. The current caused the zombies' movements to slow down noticeably. A few even convulsed and collapsed. Jiang Chuiying's dispersed electrical discharge was still strong enough to take down some zombies. And for those holding steel plates, the conductivity was even more devastating. Over time, Jiang Chuiying hadn't been idle. Her power generation had improved significantly. The zombies in front immediately became sluggish, like the undead in movies. At the same time, sharp spikes suddenly protruded from the front of the bus. The cold gleam of metal made Bai Jingchong's eyes widen. What on earth is that? The others were also stunned. The turret on the roof was already beyond imagination, and now these spikes. Spikes weren't rare, but appearing on a bus in this manner was truly unprecedented. The engine roared, and the bus didn't even try to dodge. Instead, it accelerated, charging straight into the zombies ahead. The bus with the turret on top, covered in blue-white electrical arcs, charged into the horde like a silver-armored beast, tearing a path through flesh and blood. Blood sprayed everywhere, and heavy thuds echoed continuously. The man in the car watched the scene, dumbfounded, feeling as if he had just been struck hard in the head. This vehicle was too terrifying. Who said Team Shadow was about to die? Clearly, the ones about to die were the zombies. Zhang Jing now fully believed what Xin Tao had said. I had modified a truly formidable vehicle, not just formidable on paper, but formidable enough to make people tremble. Watching the bus easily crush the armored zombies, both soldiers and survivors couldn't hide their admiration. So strong. Just then, inside the car, Rin Shiyu's eyes suddenly lit up. "There's one more light point." "That's the one," I said in a low voice. Unlike the others, I had been focusing all my attention on this final rebar-throwing zombie from the start. Kill it, and the threat will end. It's charging. It's very fast. Rin Shiyu suddenly opened her eyes wide. "Brother Jiang, this one isn't like the others." Her shocked tone made my expression change. "Not like the others? Could it have completed its evolution?" Level 1 mutant zombie detected. The system's voice rang in my head. At the same time, in front of the bus, from behind the horde, a black shadow suddenly shot upward. It jumped over 2 meters high, nearly level with me. It used a large steel plate to cover its entire body, while its other hand gripped a rebar much thicker than the previous ones. Both ends were covered in dried blood, dark red like rust. The plate was riddled with dents and bloodstains. Though I couldn't see its entire body, I could feel the terrifying explosive power radiating from it. My gaze instantly turned sharp as my finger pulled the trigger. Boom! At such close range, the bullet pierced right through the steel plate. But through the bullet hole, I suddenly saw a pair of blood-red eyes, chillingly cold. There was no madness, only pure killing intent. That was the eyes of a zombie. I was all too familiar with the crazed look of zombies, but the one before me was entirely different. If the ones holding plates or throwing rebars earlier only made me feel they had a bit of wit, this one felt like a creature, non-human, but capable of thinking like one. It didn't target the bus itself, but chose to attack the person operating the gun inside me. Perhaps in its eyes, I was even more dangerous than the vehicle. Zhang Jing's expression immediately changed. That was the mutant zombie, the monster that had nearly wiped out an entire survivor team. He hadn't expected it to hide within the horde, only appearing when I posed a significant enough threat. If not for me, it might have waited until the horde completely surrounded the military before launching a fatal blow. This snake-like patience made Zhang Jing's skin crawl. He even thought that the 2 survivors from before were only alive because the monster hadn't considered them targets worth bothering with. Ing immediately shifted into reverse and slammed the gas. The bus surged backward. There was a perfect understanding between us. No words were needed. At the same moment, the rebar in the mutant zombie's hand shrieked as it was launched. Even though the bus was reversing fast, the rebar still hit the combat turret. The special alloy, which had extremely high bullet resistance, still showed a slight dent. I even suspected that if we had been a beat slower, the turret might have been pierced. If that hit had struck me, it would have been no different from being shot by a sniper at close range. A hit to the body would tear me in half. A hit to the head would leave nothing left. This zombie's strength far exceeded the others. Even though it was only a level 1 mutant, the threat it posed was greater than the level 2 mutant python from before. The sound of metal hitting the alloy boomed like thunder, making everyone think I was dead. But at the exact moment the zombie attacked, I had pulled the trigger. When they saw the tongue of flame erupt from the AM-2, everyone was stunned. Did it miss? Clang! The bullet pierced the steel plate, but still didn't touch the mutant zombie. It moved too fast. When it landed on the ground with its plate and rebar, it looked like a meteorite had struck. It looked up, and amidst the horde, our eyes met. It looked almost human, except for those unmistakable blood-red eyes. That gaze looked at me like I was a piece of raw meat, so cold that even serial killers couldn't compare. Humans lose their humanity. This thing never had it to begin with. I clearly felt the danger, and it also recognized the threat from me. It quickly vanished into the horde, causing my pupils to constrict. I couldn't let it hide and then ambush us. Rin Xiu, point out its position, I said. She immediately ran to the cockpit, using her psychic observation to track and report its direction. Ing floored the gas, and the bus with its gleaming spikes charged straight into the forest. Some trees were only as thick as a thumb, others as thick as 3 bowls. Under the fire and impact, many trees were leveled. The rest weren't enough to stop the bus. What people feared wasn't the trees, but the darkness of the forest, where no one knew how many zombies were hiding, especially with a mutant like that. But I dared to charge in, and my bus dared too. If we didn't take it out now, I wasn't sure the turret could withstand another sneak attack. This zombie gave me a massive sense of crisis, so I had to kill it. It didn't know that on my bus, there was someone who could track it. As the bus entered the forest, I immediately ordered, "Prepare the air cannon." This weapon was too eye-catching. I didn't want to reveal it in front of so many people. Speed up. The bus, at top speed, finally caught up with the mutant zombie. It had intended to hide as before to find another opportunity, but it didn't expect the bus to stay so close. Without hesitation, it turned and charged straight at the bus like a cannonball, letting out a violent roar. It wasn't the raspy growl of a normal zombie, but a roar that echoed like a predator in the ancient jungle. It carried a sonic pressure that made the soldiers and survivors outside turn cold, their bodies trembling. What the hell is that? Is that really a zombie? Many were terrified. Eagle was the only one who could track them in the forest. But both the bus and the monster were too fast. His eyes only saw 2 shadows racing through the broken trees. The bus had already given him enough shocks, but the mutant zombie was something else. Damn it, it's running as fast as the bus. Eagle shouted. The terrifying speed combined with the rebar in its hand made him remember the pierced SUV. No matter how tough the bus was, there was still a risk of being pierced. Zhang Jing also raised his binoculars. This time he saw more clearly, and sweat soaked his palms. He had underestimated it. If they had been ambushed by this monster unprepared, the losses would have been catastrophic. At the same time, he held his breath for the bus. In the tight space of the dense forest, the bulky bus was clearly at a disadvantage against that agile creature. But the bus didn't flinch. I locked onto the charging zombie and pulled the trigger. Boom! I aimed for the center of its body, but after a clang, it kept charging. However, I clearly saw a spray of blood. It was wounded. Still, its speed didn't decrease. For a zombie, a wound like that was negligible. I didn't know how strong their regenerative abilities were, but with that horrific physique, it was likely very high. Too fast. I only had time for 1 shot, and the distance had closed to 20 meters, practically non-existent. Air cannon, fire. I ordered in my mind. The zombie and the bus collided. A violent explosion rang out. After sweeping away the surrounding trees, Eagle's and the other's vision was immediately obscured. Even standing far away, he instinctively ducked. Too terrifying. No one could tell if it was a collision or some other weapon. Trees were blown away, the ground shook, and everyone was stunned. Are they really fighting a zombie? Bai Zhengcheng stared at the forest, sweat beading on his forehead. He only hoped that I and the mutant zombie would take each other out. If it survived, his only choice was to run. A rebar was stuck in the windshield, just centimeters away. In front of the bus was the mutant zombie. The protective steel plate was gone, revealing the body behind it. It only had the frame of a thin man, wearing tattered suit trousers, barefoot, with flesh that was all lean muscle as hard as steel. Its muscles twitched. The sniper wound in its right chest had gouged out a large chunk along with a lung. If it were human, it would certainly be dead. But its blood had stopped flowing, and its cold gaze was still locked on the bus. Behind the windshield were Ring Shiyu, and Jiang Chuiying, all ready. At that exact moment, blood began to pour from the zombie's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. It didn't die from the sniper bullet, but because the air cannon had crushed its internal organs. The wound that had stopped bleeding now opened up again, blood gushing out. But it still stepped forward, gripping the rebar, taking one more step. Boom! The sniper rifle spat a long tongue of flame, and the zombie's head exploded. The moment it collapsed fell perfectly into the hawk-like eyes of Zhang Jing and the onlookers. The headless body stood frozen, motionless, while the gun barrel still puffed pale blue smoke after the shot. At this moment, I saw the hawk-eyed man couldn't help but swallow hard. This thing was really dead. Zhang Jing was stunned for a second, but as a commander, he quickly regained his composure and shouted, "The mutant zombie has been eliminated by the Shuriying squad. Victory is right before our eyes. Everyone, focus your fire and wipe out the remaining zombies." When the mutant zombie fell, the zombies holding steel plates and the ones throwing steel bars were visibly shaken, dropping their makeshift weapons in unison. This horde of zombies, including the ones throwing steel bars earlier, were all under the control of the mutant zombie. I had killed the alpha, so the rest completely lost their ability to use tools. Without the steel plates for protection, they were just ordinary zombies, no longer posing a significant threat to the military and the survivors. I had to admit, the combat capabilities of the military far exceeded those of ordinary survivor squads. Despite the massive shock they just experienced, they quickly stabilized their formation, calmly providing cover fire for me and the Shuriying squad. Many zombies were drawn by my minibus and dragged back toward the woods. The military immediately focused their firepower, sweeping through and rapidly wiping them out. The captain of the Longyue squad didn't hesitate either, immediately leading his men out to coordinate with the military and decisively dispatch the zombies one by one. Bai Zhengcheng hesitated for a moment, but finally gritted his teeth and roared, "Quangfeng brothers, follow me and kill these zombies." But as soon as he turned his head, he saw the burly man next to him still staring blankly toward the woods, clearly unable to believe that the mutant zombie had actually been shot dead by me. Damn it! Bai Zhengcheng was so furious he wanted to kick the guy off the car. Wasn't this the same guy who swore the Shuriying squad would fail? Yet the outcome was the exact opposite. Bai Zhengcheng's heart was filled with anxiety. His only saving grace was that there hadn't been any severe conflict between us yet. If he played his cards right, maybe I wouldn't come after them. The role of the survivor squads was originally just to coordinate with the military's firepower for the decapitation strike. Previously, Zhang Jing had been quite satisfied with the efficiency of the Longyue and Quangfeng squads. But after witnessing the true power of the Shuriying squad with his own eyes, he finally understood what a real decapitation strike looked like. In comparison, the Quangfeng squad's past efforts now seemed practically worthless to him. In the woods, upon seeing the mutant zombie's head blown apart, Ren Shiyu's face was pale, her breathing still heavy. Standing in the cabin, she had watched the mutant monster charge straight at us, seeing the steel bar flash into a black dot right before her eyes. The crushing weight of both mental and physical pressure made her heart skip a beat in that split second. But in the very next moment, the monster was dead. The feeling made Ren Shiyu feel like she was dreaming. It wasn't until I slung the sniper rifle over my shoulder and stepped out of the combat cabin that she slowly regained her senses. This gun is truly badass. I looked down at the AMR-2 sniper rifle, extremely satisfied with its performance. Compared to the Type 81 assault rifle, The AMR-2 had vastly superior power and armor-piercing capabilities. Of course, one was a semi-automatic assault rifle and the other a heavy sniper rifle. They were fundamentally different weapons. They were suited for different combat scenarios and couldn't be directly compared. I placed the AMR-2 down on the carpet, grabbed the Type 81, and stepped off the bus. By this time, Zhang Hai had also driven the freezer truck along the path, cleared by the minibus. They had absolutely no part in the battle with the mutant zombie just now. If they had to face that monster head-on, they probably wouldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. Therefore, they proactively kept their distance to avoid becoming a burden to the minibus. Once the mutant zombie was eliminated, they immediately caught up to help clean up the remaining zombies. Holding the Type 81, I stepped off the bus with Jiang Zhuiying. Ing also jumped down from the driver's cabin right behind us. The bus door closed. Ren Xiu hurriedly went to the window, keeping an eye on us while expanding her mental perception to stand guard over the surroundings. After dealing with a few approaching zombies, I quickly made my way toward the mutant zombie. By now, its corpse had completely collapsed, and its terrifying aura had dissipated with it. What caught my attention were the mutant zombie's highly unusual ears. There were gruesome, jagged scars around its ears. A faint pink scar remained on its limbs. Notably, one ear seemed to be only half there, not bitten off, but as if it hadn't fully regenerated yet. Regeneration of severed limbs? I had previously suspected that zombies possessed powerful regenerative abilities, but I didn't expect them to be able to regrow lost body parts. Before the apocalypse, some creatures like lizards or octopuses had this ability. When an octopus loses a tentacle, it can constrict its blood vessels to automatically seal the wound. After 6 hours, blood flow resumes, and by the very next day, a new limb begins to grow. Humans never had that ability, yet this mutant zombie did. Successfully eliminated a Level 1 mutant zombie. Level 1 blood core detected, located in the mutant zombie's heart. Hearing the notification, I froze for a second and frowned. Blood core? Not a mutant core? This blood core was similar to the blood cores of mutant beasts, also located in the heart. Even though this was a mutant zombie and not a human, it used to be human after all. I really didn't want to dissect a human body, but with a blood core right in front of me, I couldn't just ignore it. I pulled out my military knife, took a deep breath, and tore open the tattered clothes on the mutant zombie's body. "What are you doing?" Jiang Zhuiying gasped. I shot her a glance, making her immediately feign innocence and turn her head away. Her long katana slashing a charging zombie to pieces, electricity crackling brightly along the blade. When the clothes were torn away, I was even more astonished. The zombie's body was covered in dense regeneration scars, showing just how brutal its evolutionary process had been. Perhaps to survive, it had to fight fiercely among thousands, even tens of thousands of other zombies. But when I looked at the location of its heart, I breathed a sigh of relief. No need to dissect it myself. Unlike the mutant cores of other mutated creatures, this zombie's blood core was exposed right outside its heart. A black, jade-like blood core, irregular in shape, was tightly wrapped in thick, pinky-sized blood vessels. It looked like the mutant zombie's second heart. Even after the monster was dead, this blood core was still faintly beating, as if it still held life. A strange feeling washed over me, almost making me believe this blood core was still alive. I skillfully used the military knife to sever the blood vessels underneath, causing the blood core to detach and fall neatly into my hand. The moment the blood core was removed, the surrounding blood vessels instantly withered. The sight left me in awe. At the same time, the blood core in my hand continued to pulse faintly, as if it possessed an independent life of its own. Holding the cold blood core, I could feel its gentle, rhythmic beating. Just from the name and shape alone, it was obvious that a mutant zombie's blood core was completely different from a mutant beast's mutant core. But as for exactly how they differed, I still wasn't sure. "Captain Jiang," a man's voice called out as a vehicle approached from a distance. I handed the blood core to Ing, then turned to look at the slowly approaching car. Bai Zhengchong stopped his car quite a distance away from the minibus. He clearly sensed that even though there were only 3 of us standing there, we all maintained extremely high vigilance against this sudden approach. Seeing that reaction, he could only sigh inwardly. Honestly, They were the ones who should be on guard against us. With that terrifying marksmanship, just seeing me hold a gun was enough to send chills down anyone's spine, fearing they could be shot down at any moment. Jiang Zhuiying and that cold girl were the same. Neither was easy to deal with. When Jiang Zhuiying unleashed her electricity, Bai Jingcheng was deeply shaken. With her power alone, she could easily establish a formidable survivor squad in Zhonghai. Yet in the Shuriying squad, she only quietly stood behind to support me, deliberately hiding her true strength. As for me, in Bai Jingcheng's eyes, I was an absolute freak. My ability didn't sound like much, but the results I produced were unbelievably powerful. Especially my marksmanship, it was simply too outstanding. Captain Jiang, you're amazing. I really didn't expect this. Bai Jingcheng flashed an incredibly hearty smile as he stepped out of the car. He knew very well that if I wanted to kill him, even if he hid in his car 100 meters away, he wouldn't stand a chance. So the smartest choice was to act relaxed and show a sincere attitude. Looking at that smiling face, I only felt annoyed and shot him a cold glare. The Shuriying squad and the Quangfing squad had clashed before. I had no reason to treat him nicely. The smile on Bai Jingcheng's face froze for a moment. Before the apocalypse, he wasn't the type to be easily bullied. But now, standing before me, he had no choice but to try and keep his cool. Captain Jiang, there was a little misunderstanding between us before, but now we've fought side by side. I hope you can be magnanimous and let bygones be bygones, he said with utmost sincerity. I looked at him, admitting that he was quite tactful in this situation. But my face didn't show any emotion, nor did I give him a positive response. Right then, Ren Shiyu's voice echoed in my mind. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He still harbors the intent to kill you. My expression remained unchanged, but a cold smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. Got it. With that, I turned and walked straight back to the minibus. Bai Jingcheng stood frozen in place, his neck stiff. Got it. He was so furious he cursed inwardly, completely failing to understand what that meant. He could only watch helplessly as we returned to the vehicle. The minibus quickly started up, turned around, and kicked up a flurry of branches, some of which whipped right at him, forcing him to dodge. Bam! Crash! Smash! The bus plowed through the zombie horde, charging toward the toll station. Bai Jingcheng had just brushed off the branches clinging to him when he was immediately hit by another sweep of leaves. The freezer truck drove past, blowing exhaust smoke right into his face. Staring at the back of the truck, his already pale face turned even greener. Damn it, boss, that Jiang Lusher and his crew are too arrogant. They really don't know what's good for them. The burly man next to him grumbled. Bai Jingcheng whipped around, glaring at him, and barked, "Shut up." I glanced at Bai Jingcheng and his men through the rearview mirror, then withdrew my gaze, focusing back on the blood core in my hand. Ing had placed it on the minibus earlier, and now it was resting neatly in my palm again. Brother Jiang, that was awesome. As soon as he saw the minibus return, Xin Dao immediately drove up, sticking his head out the window and shouting. Beside him was an officer, staring at me with an almost dumbfounded expression. Haha, don't mind him, Brother Jiang. He's just in shock, Xin Dao said with a cheerful laugh. The officer couldn't help but ask, Brother Jiang, how did you learn to shoot like that? I learned after the apocalypse. As for how to use a gun, I learned from them, I said, pointing toward Zhang Hai and his crew in the freezer truck. The officer's jaw dropped. He really learned after the apocalypse? Hearing that answer, only a string of curses echoed in his mind. Right then, Zhang Jing, sitting in the armored vehicle, also approached. Captain Jiang. At the same time, the Starseed's voice rang in my head. The base car has unlocked a new feature. I was just about to check out the base car's new feature, quite curious since it unlocked right at this moment. But Zhang Jing had already arrived in front of my vehicle. His face was still serious, though no longer as cold as before. He jumped down from the armored vehicle, walked up to me, and said, Captain Jiang, thanks for your hard work. With that, Zhang Jing stood straight and gave a crisp military salute. Seeing this gesture, my eyes flickered slightly, and I stepped out of the vehicle. Jiang Zhuiying followed right behind me. The surrounding area was now clear of the alpha zombie. The ordinary zombies had been quickly wiped out under the hail of bullets, so the area was no longer dangerous. Zhang Jing spoke very seriously, The Shuriing squad has made a massive contribution this time. Eliminating the mutant zombie directly changed the tide of the battle. Once we return, I will write a report to my superiors, requesting a reward for Captain Jiang and everyone else. I nodded. Thank you. For someone like Zhang Jing, going this far was already a concession. There was no need to push him further. With Captain Zhang's abilities and marksmanship, you could absolutely join the military. Your future would be very bright, Zhang Jing added. I understood that what he valued wasn't just my shooting, but my special ability. If this ability were used to upgrade military vehicles, the results would be tremendous. My minibus was enough to shock anyone. In the apocalypse, only those with true strength had a voice, and Zhang Jing's attitude toward me had clearly undergone a complete 180. Standing nearby, Shen Dao looked at me with a mix of awe and envy. If I agreed to join the military, the position I'd get would definitely not be that of a minor officer like him. I shook my head. I'm used to freedom. I'm not suited for the military environment. Joining the military meant obeying too many rules, which didn't sit well with me. Zhang Jing was a bit surprised, but didn't force the issue. That's fine. Take your time to think about it. We can always cooperate in the future. Shen Dao immediately looked visibly disappointed. He really wanted to become my comrade in arms. When the Quangfing squad returned, Bai Zhengchong deliberately kept his vehicle at a distance from mine. His face was dark, and he didn't even bother to glance over. Zhang Jing noticed the reaction, knowing the two squads had friction, but as long as no major conflict broke out during the mission, he had no intention of intervening. Zhang Jing's eyes lingered on the gun in my hand. Not a bad gun. Unloaded, it only weighs 11 kilograms, and the stock can be folded. Very convenient to carry. I nodded, genuinely satisfied with this sniper rifle. Seeing me bring the gun onto the bus, a soldier's eyes widened. My gun. The officer with Shen Dao laughed and said, "Go ask the commander to compensate you with another one." The soldier looked at the minibus with a twisted expression. I had clearly said I was borrowing it, but now I wasn't giving it back. I suddenly popped my head out the window. How many magazines do you have left? This gun is out of ammo. The soldier was instantly speechless. When the last zombie fell, the gunfire ceased. Corpses littered the area around the toll station, blood dyeing the road and the woods red. The metallic stench mixed with gunpowder gave everyone a headache. Bai Zhengchong shouted, "Inventory the ammo. Clear the battlefield." A few soldiers entered the woods. Seeing the aftermath of the minibus frantically crushing the zombies, they all shuddered. When they looked at the area where the mutant zombie was fought, they were even more horrified. It looked as if a tornado had swept through. The mutant zombie's corpse was quickly bagged, ready to be taken back to Zhonghai and handed over to the research institute. After the soldiers finished reporting, Zhang Jing glanced toward my vehicle. The mutant zombie's chest had a massive caved-in hole, with black blood dried around shriveled blood vessels. Clearly, something had been taken. It was probably some kind of mutant core from the zombie. Zhang Jing frowned, then shook his head. I was right. I had the status to cooperate, not act as his subordinate. I didn't need to hand over my spoils of war. Even so, Zhang Jing would still clearly document this in his report, and my reward might be affected. Back on the minibus, I held the blood core, sitting in the passenger seat and looking at the Starseed's control panel. A new feature had been unlocked, directly related to my elimination of the mutant zombie. I knew the Starseed still had many locked functions. I just had to survive long enough in the apocalypse for them to gradually reveal themselves. This time, the new feature was called the Basecar Laboratory. The biological laboratory could create gene evolution fluid. So what could the Basecar Laboratory do? I swiped open the control panel, and a series of options appeared. Basecar Energy, Basecar Robot Crafting, Basecar Camouflage, Basecar Transformation. Except for energy, the other options were locked. A robot was something I had never seen before, but my eyes quickly locked onto the last two options, especially Basecar Transformation. Transformation? Was it the kind of transformation I was thinking of? Like a transformer? Images of giant mechas from sci-fi movies instantly popped into my head. If I could really pilot a transformer into a horde of zombies, that would be incredibly badass. Unfortunately, there was no simulation image, so I wasn't sure if my guess was right. I shifted my gaze back to the Basecar Energy option. Basecar Energy requires a mutant blood core to activate. Blood cores of any level can be used. Different levels yield different effects. Using one mutant blood core can enhance a specific feature of the base car. Enhanced ramming impact. Effect lasts for 1 minute. Enhanced defense. Effect lasts for 1 minute. Increased speed. Almost all the basic features of the base car could be enhanced. I really wanted to try using this blood core, but I only had one right now. If I used it, it would be gone. I was also curious about what the Military Science Academy would discover from researching this blood core. This thing came from a mutant zombie, and zombies were originally mutated from humans. So I always felt it couldn't be the same as a mutant beast's core, let alone simply extracted into an evolution crystal. Even the starseed had a completely different application for the blood core compared to a mutant core. Mutant zombies were too rare. Right now, what I needed most was still a level 2 mutant core. I thought to myself, the abilities I gained from the starseed's gene evolution fluid were completely different from the path of other paranormals. Those people relied on fighting or eating mutant beast meat to gradually evolve. I could only improve my skills through combat, while eating mutant beast meat only helped improve my physique in the long run. But brain capacity, agility, or bloodline evolution couldn't be directly achieved. True evolution ultimately had to rely on the biological laboratory. After facing that mutant zombie head-on, I realized even more that my current strength was still lacking. If I could reach its level, then unless I encountered an extremely dangerous situation, at least my personal safety would be guaranteed. But that was just a thought, and reaching that level would definitely take a lot of time. Keep moving forward. Clear the path. Zhang Jing's voice rang out decisively. Next, the infantry fighting vehicle will take the lead. The Shuriing squad will be in charge of perimeter security and support. The Longyue and Quangfing squads will take turns assisting the engineers in clearing obstacles along the way. Hearing the new orders, Bai Jingcheng's face instantly went from pale to beet red. Zhang Jing adjusting the orders based on each squad's combat strength wasn't wrong, but in Bai Jingcheng's eyes, it was nothing short of a slap in the face. He glared darkly at Zhang Jing, cursing him as a two-faced hypocrite, then glanced over at the Shuriing squad. I sat in the car, completely ignoring him, but in the freezer truck, Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan had noticed his glare. Heh! Zhang Hai let out a soft, mocking chuckle. Bai Jingcheng quickly looked away, taking a few deep breaths to force himself to calm down. He was used to throwing his weight around, but now he was being looked down upon and mocked by the likes of Zhang Hai. He couldn't swallow this anger. Captain Jiang, hello. I'm Wang Chuanfu, captain of the Longyue squad. The Longyue squad's vehicle pulled up close, the window rolled down, and Wang Chuanfu took the initiative to greet me. The strength I displayed made him want to build a connection. Nice to meet you, I replied with a smile. Previously, the Longyue squad had kept their distance from us, but I didn't mind. In the apocalypse, people were very pragmatic, even extremely rational. If you weren't strong enough, no one paid attention to you. Wang Chuanfu mentioned that they had been operating around Zhonghai for a long time. If I ever needed to hunt mutant beasts, I could just look for him, because the information and maps sold at the trading hall were mostly fake. I thanked him but said I didn't have a contact code yet, silently admitting that these veterans indeed held more information. He laughed it off, saying no code was needed. I just had to go to the trading hall and look for the Longyue squad holding a purchasing sign. His eyes unconsciously drifted into the minibus, clearly a bit surprised. He hadn't noticed before, but now he realized the inside was a luxurious mobile home. 3 beautiful women, a minibus acting as a lavish mobile fortress. Captain Jiang, you really know how to live in style, he said with an envious tone. I could only stay silent, feeling helpless. Whenever people saw the 3 girls, their imaginations ran wild, looking at me with an I understand kind of gaze. I couldn't explain that things weren't what they thought, and clearly, they had already completely misunderstood. After the brief chat, my minibus continued to follow the convoy. Zhang Jing ordered the IFV to take the lead and clear the path, while the other squads took turns removing obstacles. The shock of facing the mutant zombie made my determination to increase my strength even stronger, even though I knew this path would consume a lot of time and resources. On the contrary, the dissatisfaction and jealousy within the Quangfing squad grew more apparent, especially from Bai Jingcheng. But in the current situation, he couldn't do anything but harbor resentment. Rin Xiu also heard what Wang Chuanfu said. She froze for a moment, then lowered her head, the tips of her ears hidden beneath her hair, turning slightly red. She had never been teased like this before, but now everyone was thinking in that direction. If I hadn't chimed in with a few words in time, Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan probably would have started calling her sister-in-law. She did object, but it was too weak. No one heard her. The convoy quickly moved out. There were too many corpses in this area. Staying too long would easily attract more zombies and mutant beasts. Our mission was to clear the road, so we couldn't afford to waste any more time. Leaving the highway, the convoy entered a small town, which used to be a famous ancient tourist town before the apocalypse. There were many places like this in Jiangnan, usually an ancient town situated next to a modern one, blending antique style with modern development, and the population density wasn't low either. The zombies from earlier likely came from this ancient town. The surrounding buildings were gloomy, doors wide open, with bloodstains and signs of zombies everywhere. Because of the road-clearing mission, we didn't venture deep into the ancient town tourist area. The roar of the engines tore through the dead silence. By the time we cleared a street, it was getting dark. The convoy stopped in front of an isolated resort farm. It had a large courtyard, a spacious parking lot, and fields and orchards in the back. Soldiers went in to check, a few gunshots rang out, zombies were dragged outside, and the interior was quickly disinfected. "We're camping here tonight," Bai Zhengchong stepped out and said. He made an excuse about needing the restroom and hurried inside the building. Chu Songming exchanged a few words with the soldiers outside, then also headed back in. "Didn't I tell you not to talk to me privately while we're out on this mission?" Chu Songming asked calmly in the small room, while Bai Zhengchong stood at the door, vigilantly watching the outside, while quickly explaining that the Shuriying squad was the one that destroyed their casino before. Chu Songming was startled, his eyes narrowing. Bai Zhengchong frustratingly recounted how he went to apologize, but I only replied with a single "got it," assuming I was too arrogant and had no intention of accepting the apology. He stated bluntly that letting me live would be a disaster, wanting to borrow Chu Songming's hand to kill me. Chu Songming didn't answer directly, only consoling him to continue the mission, saying that even in the military, I had to be cautious and couldn't do anything to him. Bai Zhengchong reluctantly nodded, still cursing nonstop in his heart. Outside, the soldiers began preparing dinner. Zhang Jing and the officers studied the map for a safe route to Tongnan City. The survivor squads were mostly busy outside, checking their vehicles and refueling. At the same time, in a high-rise building in the distance, a pair of binoculars was lowered, revealing a face full of excitement. "Damn, it really is the military," the man said, then pulled the curtains shut and ran inside. The outside of the building looked quiet, but the rooftop had been cleared out. About 20 men were gathered, all looking burly and tough. In the center sat a calm man with a rugged face and a large scar running across his left eye, slowly wiping his gun. The gleaming assault rifle was neatly placed beside him. "Captain Long, the military is here," the man with the binoculars reported. Zhou Long didn't stop his hands, asking in a hoarse voice, "How many men?" "About 40 to 50. I counted carefully," the man immediately replied. Clink. A bullet dropped, and Zhou Long's gun-wiping motion paused. Zhou Long picked up the binoculars, walked to the window, and took a look. Sure enough, it was exactly as reported. A convoy of about 40 or 50 people, including quite a few military vehicles and modified SUVs. Everyone was fully armed with guns and ammo, and there was even an infantry fighting vehicle. They had heard gunfire from afar earlier, but they didn't expect the military to take this route and camp so close to their hideout. That meant the mutant zombie had already been eliminated. Fantastic! Zhou Long broke into a joyful smile. Because of that mutant zombie, they had been forced to hide in this godforsaken place for days. This was truly an unexpected piece of good news. Zhou Long's eyes couldn't help but lock onto the resort farm, especially that IFV. It was a Type 92 wheeled infantry fighting vehicle. He could name it accurately because, before the apocalypse, he had been a military officer stationed at a nearby toll booth when the outbreak occurred. Zhou Long had watched plenty of apocalyptic movies and firmly believed that when the end of the world truly arrived, all laws would be meaningless. The strong would rule everything. He could have as many subordinates as he wanted, and take any woman he desired without anyone stopping him. The beauties he only dared to dream of before, the noble rich girls, could all be in his grasp now. Moreover, he had guns. So, when the apocalypse broke out, Zhou Long immediately made his decision, shot the captain next to him dead, and fled. Later, he regretted bringing too little ammo, never expecting the military to sell weapons to survivor squads. But even so, with the guns and grenades in his hands, he quickly built up his power and became the top dog in this town. An IFV, plus so many machine guns and ammunition. Zhou Long stared at the resort farm, his eyes burning with greed. The man holding the binoculars couldn't help but ask, "Captain Long, you're not planning to target them, are you?" Zhou Long shot him a glare. "Do you think my head got slammed in a door?" Even though he coveted that IFV, he was still rational. Don't be fooled by the number of men on his side. Even though he handpicked and trained them all, compared to the military stationed at the farm, they were just a disorganized mob. "Aqiang, see those SUVs? Those belong to the survivor squads. If they're traveling with the military, they must be loaded too." Zhou Long shifted his gaze to the SUVs. Compared to the military, these survivor squads were nothing, but compared to him, they were still better off. He was a mob, and they were amateurs. They're living even better than me. A sinister idea began to sprout in Zhou Long's mind. He saw the people stepping out of the SUVs. Everyone was clean and tidy, their hair slick, holding guns. On his side, although they didn't lack food, they had been extremely short on water these past few days. Even though he bathed, the others reeked of a foul stench. Zhou Long's eyes swept over a minibus. Compared to the SUVs, this vehicle wasn't very eye-catching, but he suddenly froze and stared intently. 3 beautiful women stepped out of the minibus, each with her own unique charm. One had an elegant, gentle aura that ignited a man's desire to conquer. Another was young, with long legs, definitely over 1.7 meters tall, carrying a long sword. The last one had a figure so perfect it made his heart pound. There were a few women in Zhou Long's squad too, but they hadn't bathed in a long time, their hair matted and their bodies reeking. He only let them wash up hastily, forbidding any waste of water. Compared to the 3 women before him, his were disgusting. These were real women. Then he saw a young man step off the bus, looking only about 20 years old, much younger than him. Are all 3 of those women his? Damn it! Zhou Long's eyes burned with intense jealousy. This kid was living out his dream before he could. Being the boss meant living the life you wanted, standing above everyone else, and taking all the beauties. "Looks like their cars are about to move." Aqiang suddenly spoke up. Zhou Long quickly looked back. Sure enough, the convoy started up, heading toward the center of the town, the ancient town area. The 3 women and the young man also got back on the minibus. Only the military remained at the farm. Zhou Long's eyes darted between the farm and the survivor squads. Then he muttered, "Follow them." At this moment, I was driving the minibus, listening to Zhang Hai, who was driving the freezer truck next to me, say that Zhang Jing had called us out to stand guard. The other 2 squads were probably getting ready to scavenge for supplies. Jiang Zhuing leaned against the window, saying Zhang Jing probably intended that too. Although strict, he understood how to handle people. Letting the survivor squads take the opportunity to scavenge along the way was normal, as long as it didn't interfere with the mission. Giving them the chance proactively was better than having them sneak around. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan both nodded in agreement. I saw they were quite excited, so I didn't say anything more. I wasn't short on supplies, but they always were. And ordinary food was still a scarce commodity. Gathering more wouldn't hurt. Once we hit the main road, Bai Zhengchong immediately ordered the Kuangfing squad to turn onto another street, clearly trying to avoid me. His subordinates felt frustrated, and he himself was even more irritated. "Stop here for a bit." He felt like he was going crazy and wanted to stop for a smoke to calm down. In his mind, he cursed Chu Songming, a guy who usually threw his weight around relying on his family's power, but when help was needed, he wouldn't back him up. But after only 2 puffs, Bai Zhengchong heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. Before he could even pay attention, the subordinate sent to keep watch screamed in terror and scrambled back into the car. Needless to say, Bai Zhengchong also saw the vehicle charging toward them. On the narrow street, my minibus came rushing in like a maniac, knocking aside abandoned cars, its engine roaring like a wild beast. The front of the vehicle didn't look particularly menacing, but in Bai Zhengcheng's eyes right now, it was no different from a demon. His eyes widened, his hair standing on end. In his mind, he cursed Chu Songming's ancestors to the 18th generation. Didn't he say I wouldn't make a move? Back up now, Bai Zhengcheng roared. Seeing the driver freeze, he slapped him hard. The guy's cheeks swelled, blood seeping from his mouth, but he snapped out of it and slammed the gas to reverse. Crash. My minibus slammed straight into the back of the SUV. The entire vehicle shook violently, feeling like a truck had rammed right into their chests. Bai Zhengcheng's SUV had been reinforced with multiple layers of steel, but the impact still made him feel like the car was going to fall apart. The driver screamed in panic, frantically stomping on the gas. You bastard, Bai Zhengcheng cursed. Abandon the car. Run straight into the supermarket ahead. This was the right choice. My vehicle and my marksmanship were both too terrifying. But if they engaged in close combat inside the supermarket, he would feel less afraid. The SUV crashed into the single-story supermarket, knocking over rows of shelves and even sending a few zombies flying. The driver slammed on the brakes, his heart still pounding wildly with fear. Bai Zhengcheng grabbed his Type 81 assault rifle and jumped out of the car, his face flushed, his eyes bloodshot. Everyone get ready for me. Not far away, two off-road vehicles quietly pulled up. Zhou Long had originally been tailing my vehicle, but he didn't expect me to turn around and attack the Quangfing squad. What surprised him even more was that the SUV crashed straight into the supermarket, while my minibus was speeding like a sports car. Wasn't this infighting among the survivor squads? In that case, there was even less need for him to rush. He could just stand back and watch the show first. Zhou Long felt he was incredibly lucky today. First, he escaped the threat of the mutant zombie, and now he stumbled right into the survivors fighting each other. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Hopefully they beat each other to the point of mutual destruction. But make sure those three girls don't die, Zhou Long said with a sadistic thrill. Compared to women, he cared more about guns and ammo, but if the women survived, even better. He signaled his men to park the off-road vehicles at the entrance of a small alley and hide them. Then he grabbed his binoculars, found a comfortable spot, and started watching. The noise from the SUV and the minibus quickly attracted the surrounding zombies, allowing Zhou Long to sit back and enjoy the show like he was watching a play. In the building where Zhou Long and his gang were hiding, right next to their room was another cramped space. At least 30 people, both men and women, were locked inside. Their spirits were broken, their eyes hollow, devoid of any life. The stench of sweat, urine, and rotting flesh mixed together, so pungent it was hard to breathe. Zhou Long had a twisted personality. Ever since someone defied him and blinded one of his eyes, he constantly beat these survivors, even the women who had tried to curry favor with him. Recently, being trapped for so long, his mood had worsened, and the beatings had become even more brutal. The beaten had no medicine, left only to let their wounds rot. When they died, Zhou Long would have his men drag the bodies out and throw them to the zombies to be eaten clean, leaving no trace behind. No one spoke. Even though they had heard the gunfire earlier, those sounds seemed to belong to another world. They knew Zhou Long had gone out to hunt a fat target, but that didn't stir up the slightest emotion in them. Many of them had once been prey dragged back here themselves. Perhaps soon, new people would be brought in, but they no longer had the energy to sympathize with anyone. Screech. The minibus stopped not far from the supermarket. Hearing the noise, Bai Zhengcheng roared, Jiang Lushi, what the hell do you want? After taking cover in the supermarket, he had calmed down a bit. The ceiling here was low. The minibus definitely couldn't ram straight in. With cover, he was no longer afraid of being sniped by me. Thus, his anger instantly flared up. Jiang Lushi, are you out of your damn mind? You dare start a fight with me here? You think the military will just let this slide? Let me tell you, if you really fight me, don't even think about returning to Zhonghai 1. Causing trouble while on a mission with the military was crossing a major red line. He firmly believed I would definitely be expelled from Zhonghai 1. What an idiot, not knowing how to follow the rules. Bai Zhengcheng cursed, simultaneously plotting how he would use Chu Songming to deal with me after this. Once my vehicle and weapons were confiscated, I'd have nothing left. And then, I along with the women beside me, would be tortured to death. But right at that moment, he heard the roar of an engine outside. Is he trying to run? A subordinate spat, his voice full of contempt. In their eyes, torturing others was far more familiar than actual combat. Yet, a sense of unease began to well up in Bai Zhengcheng's heart. Virum. The engine grew louder and closer. The vehicle was charging straight toward the supermarket. Open fire, he roared, his body tensing up as he scrambled backward. Damn it! There was no life or death grudge between them. Was there really a need to go to such extremes? He suddenly realized I wasn't just abnormal, I was a genuine lunatic. Meanwhile, Ren Xiu sat in the passenger seat, the deafening roar of the engine ringing in her ears. In her mental vision, the bright spots inside the supermarket were rapidly closing in. As the vehicle was about to smash into the doors, I said simply, "Close your eyes." She didn't understand why, but instinctively obeyed. At that exact moment, I activated the base car's second transformation form. Boom. The ground shook. The speeding minibus underwent a violent transformation. In the blink of an eye, the front of the vehicle morphed into a massive mining truck, carrying an earth-shattering impact as it slammed straight into the supermarket. Inside, before Bai Zhengcheng and his men could even pull the trigger, they only heard a deafening crash. Dust billowed, glass shattered, and the entire supermarket instantly collapsed. The mass and weight of the mining truck were too terrifying. A civilian building like this couldn't withstand it at all. Before they could even comprehend what was happening, they were buried under the rubble. The base car reverted to its original form in just a second. Ren Xiu only felt a violent jolt. When she opened her eyes, the sight before her left her stunned. The supermarket had completely collapsed. Bai Zhengcheng, covered in blood, pushed aside a concrete slab and stood up. Just as he was about to open his mouth, a burst of gunfire rang out. His final words choked in his throat. He had wanted to say he'd see how I died, but unfortunately, he no longer had the chance. I had no interest in hearing the last words of a guy like this. His and his gang's malicious intentions had long been sensed by Ren Xiu. In the distance, Zhou Long was completely dumbfounded. He jumped up, his eyes wide as if he had just seen a demon. Through the thick dust, he seemed to have seen a giant monster. No, he wasn't seeing things. That minibus, in a way he couldn't possibly comprehend, had directly rammed down an entire supermarket. Before he could recover from the shock, he saw the vehicle charging straight toward him. Through the binoculars, the image of the minibus rapidly magnified, and he clearly saw me sitting in the driver's seat. Right then, I raised a hand and waved at him, accompanied by an unfathomable smile. A chill ran straight down Zhou Long's spine. He saw me. "Run!" he screamed in panic. But it was too late. From the other end of the alley, the freezer truck appeared. Jiang Zhuiying and Ning stood on the back of the truck, completely blocking the escape route. Pinned from both sides, Zhou Long fell into despair. He hurriedly raised his Type 81 assault rifle, aimed straight at me, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet hit the front of the vehicle, but I didn't flinch at all. I even let out a mocking laugh. From the moment they started sneaking around, I had already spotted them through Ren Xiu's mental vision. Guys like Bai Zhengcheng were mad dogs. Even if they temporarily backed down, they were always waiting for a chance to bite. As for Zhou Long, he was just offering his head on a silver platter. I opened a small hatch on the window and stuck the barrel of my Type 81 out. "I don't care who you are. Since you want to kill me, you can only blame yourself." Zhou Long missed his shot, his eyes bulging in shock. Damn it, the windshield is bulletproof. The moment he saw the dark muzzle poke out of the window, a bone-piercing chill ran down his spine. The bulletproof glass completely crushed Zhou Long's last shred of resistance. Right now, only one thought remained in his mind: escape. Drive. Hurry. With the rear blocked, Zhou Long frantically slammed the gas, charging forward. The off-road vehicle behind immediately followed suit. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror, he suddenly yanked the steering wheel hard, causing the other car to fishtail, lose control, and crash onto the curb, slamming straight into a flower bed. Zhou Long had witnessed the speed of the minibus firsthand. He knew that if he just kept running like this, it would be a dead end. To survive, he had to cut off his tail. That action made the people in his car cry out in shock. "Captain Long, shut the hell up. Do you want to die?" Zhou Long barked coldly. Everyone instantly fell silent. Because everyone wanted to live, and naturally, their own lives were more important than anyone else's. The crashed vehicle spun on the road, its front pointing straight at the incoming minibus. The people inside watched in despair. In front of that bus, they were as fragile as tofu. At that exact moment, I fired. The bullet pierced through the rear windshield of Zhou Long's off-road vehicle, shooting straight into the cabin. Zhou Long, who was gritting his teeth and stomping on the gas, suddenly widened his eyes and looked down at his chest. The bullet from the Type 81 fired from behind had shattered the glass, hit someone in the back seat, pierced through the driver's seat, and embedded itself right into his chest. The power of the Type 81 was already terrifying, but what was even more terrifying was the skill of the person pulling the trigger. Damn it! Zhou Long spat out a mouthful of black blood, his consciousness rapidly fading. Amidst the panicked screams of the remaining men, the off-road vehicle let out a screeching brake sound before crashing straight into a roadside shop. The front of the car was crushed, blood splattering all over the cabin. At that speed, even modified, the vehicle couldn't withstand the impact. I lowered my gun, not even bothering to look at the off-road vehicle blocking the road. Run! The driver of the remaining vehicle frantically started the engine. The minibus parked behind them felt like the Grim Reaper staring them down. They only knew that after a single gunshot, the vehicle that had tried to abandon them as bait had met a tragic end. This combination of vehicle and marksmanship was far beyond their comprehension. Whether before or after the apocalypse, they were just ordinary people. Is he even human? They didn't even know how they managed to drive away. They only knew that fear had completely consumed their minds. What was that noise? At the resort farm, Zhang Jing looked up from the map and glanced outside. A soldier ran in to report that they saw a lot of smoke and dust in the distance, along with explosions. Gunfire was normal, but on that scale, it was highly suspicious. Chu Songming stood nearby, pushing up his glasses, a strange glint in his eyes. His intuition told him something was wrong. When Zhang Jing led his men to the scene, the street was already surrounded by zombies. He ordered the vehicles to stop, took out his binoculars, and saw the horde swarming around the ruins of a collapsed building, frantically digging at the concrete as if attracted by something. Then, he noticed the crushed roof of a vehicle lying amidst the zombies. It looked incredibly familiar. From another street corner, 3 vehicles sped out: the minibus, the freezer truck, and a mangled off-road vehicle with a smashed front, blood still dripping from it. The bus and truck stopped first, while the off-road vehicle drove straight up to Zhang Jing. The door opened, and an unfamiliar corpse fell out. Sun Kuan stepped out of the driver's seat, annoyed as he brushed himself off, though it only made him dirtier. What happened? Zhang Jing asked. Sun Kuan said it was probably local thugs trying to rob them. By the time they turned back, the building had already collapsed. As for the Quangfing squad that had split off earlier, they had likely been set up. How did the building collapse? Chu Songming asked. How should I know? Sun Kuan replied, his face as casual as if he were talking about something completely unrelated. It was exactly that attitude that made no one suspect a thing. I watched his acting and found it amusing, because he had volunteered to take the blame, and he really played the part well. Zhang Jing inspected the one-eyed corpse and noticed calluses from years of using guns. An ex-soldier. He frowned. If it was local thugs, and ex-military at that, with premeditation, causing a building to collapse wasn't impossible. Although he still had some doubts, Zhang Jing didn't press further. Let's move quickly. It'll be trouble if the horde catches up. The zombies in the town were gathering in increasing numbers, almost blocking the road. I knew today's matter was considered settled. The off-road vehicle and Zhou Long's body were left behind. The ammo had already been collected by Zhang Hai and the others. Another vehicle belonging to Zhou Long's subordinates had escaped, but I didn't chase after them. They were scared out of their wits. With the military still here, they definitely wouldn't dare show their faces. As I started the engine, I felt someone watching me. Turning around, I saw Chu Songming observing me. He smiled amiably, then got into the armored vehicle. I paused for a moment, unsure if that was a sign of goodwill, but didn't dwell on it. The vehicles rolled out. A few zombies raised their heads at the noise, but were quickly drawn back by the smell of fresh blood from the ruins. One zombie suddenly lunged at its kin, its claws tearing open a chest, triggering the whole horde into a feeding frenzy. Blood splattered everywhere. Elsewhere, the remaining off-road vehicle rushed into an underground parking lot, slamming the iron gates shut and piling up barricades. Violent banging echoed against the gates. The people inside stared at the doors, but their fear didn't just come from the zombies. Zhou Long was dead. They were now just a disorganized mob, not knowing what to do. After a long silence, someone suggested waiting for the military to leave, then taking the survivors in the building out to find shelter in the suburbs. More people meant more strength. The idea was quickly agreed upon. But deep down, their biggest nightmare was still that young man. Just thinking about me sent shivers down their spines. In the end, they all decided to draw the curtains tight, hide well inside the building, and absolutely not show their faces until the military and I had left the town. Back in the armored vehicle, the smile on Chu Songming's face quickly vanished, his eyes flashing with a dark gloom. This Zhang Lushi is too bold, daring to attack the Quangfing squad like that. Even without evidence, he firmly believed this incident was undoubtedly connected to the Shuriying squad. Originally, he planned to wait for the Quangfing squad to return before finding a way to deal with me. After all, once back at Zhonghai 1, without a car or guns, I would just be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in his eyes, and he had countless dirty tricks to use. Even if the plan was exposed, the ones who acted would be the Quangfing squad, completely unrelated to him. But I acted too fast, and too ruthlessly, sending a chill through Chu Songming's heart. They had already lost one survivor squad, but the mission had to continue. He couldn't afford to be careless anymore. He had to be careful so something similar wouldn't happen again. Zhang Jing spoke up, and Chu Songming sneered inwardly. Who is he guarding against? Zhang Jing looked rigid, but he was actually very sharp. He definitely guessed that this incident was related to me, but he didn't ask a single question. What a sly old fox. That guy named Chu Songming. Ren Xiu suddenly spoke up, then hesitated slightly. I feel like he's anxious. Anxious? What is he anxious about? I asked. I didn't pay much attention before, but just now when he smiled at you, I sensed a bit of unease in his heart. I gave Ren Xiu a look. Her mental ability was truly terrifying. She wasn't strong in combat, but it was like she had a third eye, able to see through people's thoughts and emotions. Why do you keep staring at me? Being stared at intently by me, Ren Xiu initially dared to look back, but quickly turned away, a bit embarrassed. She brushed her hair back and said my mental power was too strong. She couldn't read what I was thinking. I replied awkwardly. Actually, I didn't mean anything by it. I glanced toward the military's armored vehicle. This team was indeed very complicated. As for Chu Songming, I knew I had to be more cautious. Compared to zombies or mutant beasts, humans might not be as physically dangerous, but their complexity far exceeded everything else. The military was preparing to counterattack the city, but no one knew how many obstacles lay ahead. Many squads like Zhang Jing's were spreading out to clear paths and scout everywhere. The counterattack had begun. Of course, those matters didn't have much to do with me. I came to Zhonghai 1 mainly to gather supplies and upgrade the base car, and I had collected enough diesel. The mining truck was currently still too basic, only effective as a surprise attack during collisions. If it encountered high-rise buildings instead of single-story houses, it wouldn't have enough power. Therefore, both the minibus and the mining truck needed further upgrades. The mutant zombie and that giant water monster from before made me clearly feel the danger. Compared to them, the Quangfing squad was really just a pack of dogs waiting to bite from the shadows. That night, Jiang Zhuiying, the other two girls, and I slept in the bus, while Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan slept in the freezer truck nearby. The town wasn't quiet at night. Many zombies were drawn to the supermarket area by the smell of blood. After devouring the corpses, they continued to wander, occasionally letting out roars. I felt those sounds were a bit strange. Perhaps some among them were in the process of mutating, and new mutant zombies might very well appear. Tongnan City. Many years ago, I had visited here with my parents, but that was a very distant memory. Tongnan was completely different now, much more modern. The suburbs were lined with villas. Along the way, I saw quite a few luxury cars, probably driven out when people fled, but no one knew what happened after that. Tongnan had many high-tech factories and was close to Zhonghai, so it was on the list of the first cities to have its roads cleared. But we won't enter the city, just scout the perimeter. Zhang Jing said. The convoy stopped at a gas station. Under the officer's command, soldiers quickly moved toward the outskirts to secure high vantage points. Let's take a stroll around the villa area, Wang Chuanfu, captain of the manhwa squad, suggested. Scout the area on one hand, and look for supplies on the other. Zhang Jing thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement. What about you? Wang Chuanfu turned to ask me. I'm not going. I promised to go with Xin Dao. All right then. If we find any good wine, we'll drink it together when we get back. The rich hoard plenty of good stuff, he said with a laugh. So that was his target. But fine wine was also a lucrative find. For squads like Longhua, drinking it was sometimes more enjoyable than selling it. Before the apocalypse, luxury goods were out of reach for ordinary people, but after the apocalypse, as long as you had enough strength, you could find anything. I agreed. I realized Wang Chuanfu seemed to be trying to curry favor with me, probably because many people suspected my involvement in the Quangfing squad incident. Even without evidence, no one dared to cause trouble. On the contrary, they were intimidated by my strength and decisiveness. I went with Xun Dao and his teammates to a nearby high-tech factory to assess the damage. When the outbreak first happened, many people fainted right at their workplaces, leading to countless fires and explosions. Otherwise, the power and telecommunications systems wouldn't have collapsed so quickly. I remember coming here. There weren't this many factories back then. I think it was still a rural area. Jiang Zhuiying said, looking out the window. I was still little back then. At least you've been here. Seeing the once familiar scenery now overrun with zombies, my heart ached. I wondered how things were up north now. That night, I lay on the carpet, listening to Ren Shiyu's steady breathing beside me, unable to sleep. I felt an inexplicable sense of unease, but Ren Shiyu hadn't detected anything. Maybe I was just overthinking. 4 days later, the scouting by Zhang Jing and the others was almost complete. A few soldiers were preparing to leave a high-rise building. One raised his binoculars, then froze. What is that? Prepare to pull out. Everyone's worked hard these past few days, Zhang Jing said with a smile. The mission had gone smoothly. It was originally planned to take nearly 10 days, yet they had used less than half that time. The collected data had been compiled into a thick report on the condition of the factories and roads in the city. They just had to wait for the observation team to return, and they could leave. Right at that moment, a military vehicle suddenly rushed over like a drunkard, swerving erratically down the road. At first, Zhang Jing didn't pay much attention, but he quickly realized something was wrong. On guard, Zhang Jing shouted, his expression changing drastically. I looked at the vehicle from afar and could already see bloodstains smeared all over it. Everyone else immediately noticed it too. They all jumped into their vehicles, raising their guns and aiming straight at the military car. At that moment, Ren Shiyu, standing next to me, said, "There's someone inside." The military vehicle slammed on the brakes, letting out a piercing screech. Then the driver's door swung open, and a blood-soaked soldier rolled onto the ground. Following Zhang Jing's orders, a few soldiers cautiously approached, guns raised. He's been scratched. A soldier checking his wounds looked up, his face grim. Help him up. Zhang Jing lowered his gun and walked over. The injured soldier was propped up against the tire. Seeing Zhang Jing, his pale face trembled as he whispered, "They're coming." "What's coming? Where are the others?" Zhang Jing asked, his eyes locked on the soldier's arm, which was almost torn to shreds, bone exposed. It was clear this man had made it back on sheer willpower alone. All dead. Every time he opened his mouth, he coughed up a large mouthful of blood. He grabbed Zhang Jing's sleeve tightly and forced out, "Retreat. Hurry." After saying that, he spat out another mouthful of blood, his pleading eyes looking toward his own waist. Zhang Jing froze, then bent down to take the pistol from his belt. But right at that moment, the soldier's eyes suddenly bulged, turning blood red. His body emitted bizarre cracking sounds, his face turned ashen, and the corners of his mouth twitched as if trying to force a bitter smile. "The gun, give it to me." He reached out, trembling. I and the others remained silent. This was the first time we had witnessed someone about to turn into a zombie with our own eyes. He clearly wanted to end his own life before fully mutating. Bang! A sudden gunshot rang out. A bullet hole appeared on the soldier's forehead, his eyes still wide open, his red pupils dilated. Everyone turned to look at the shooter. Chu Songming lowered his gun, his eyes behind the glasses flashing with a hint of sorrow. He hadn't fully mutated yet. He still had his reason. Why didn't you let him kill himself? The soldier who had checked his wounds asked in panic. Being killed by a zombie and ending it yourself were two different fates. At least suicide preserved a shred of dignity. Chu Songming sighed. Who can guarantee he'd still be lucid enough to pull the trigger? In this situation, letting a man hold a gun is too dangerous. He continued. Besides, we need the information he risked his life to bring back. He won't die in vain. Bury him. Zhang Jing frowned, cutting Chu Songming off and ordering the soldiers to handle it. Did they run into a zombie horde? Are they heading this way? Wang Chuanfu asked with a deep frown. Prepare for battle. Looks like it's not a small number. Zhang Jing said as he walked toward the armored vehicle. Right then, I turned and saw Ren Shiyu's face as pale as if she had just seen a nightmare. What's wrong? I asked. Her lips trembled, her whole body shivering slightly. Her gray eyes looked as if she had just woken from a trance. So many zombies. A familiar sense of dread rose in my heart. How many? I don't know. Ren Shiyu could barely stand, gripping my sleeve tightly, her eyes filled with panic. A lot. Countless. They're heading this way. I can't even count them. I immediately looked in the direction the military vehicle had just fled from Tongnan. From here, the wide road was still eerily quiet. Aside from the blood-stained military car, there was nothing else. Captain Zhang, we need to leave here immediately, I said. Before Zhang Jing could reply, an officer spoke up, arguing that they should at least observe the situation further. Their mission was to scout and clear the road. New developments required even more caution. If you don't retreat now, I'm afraid you won't get another chance, I said bluntly. Ren Shiyu had mental abilities. She sensed a massive number of zombies approaching. How many? A few hundred or a few thousand? The officer tried to argue. If the number is large enough, you won't be able to hold them off, I replied coldly. Are you saying there will be a lot of zombies? Zhang Jing asked. I only know there are a lot. Exactly how many, I don't know. You can decide for yourselves, but I choose to trust my teammate. With that, I grabbed Ren Shiyu's trembling hand, pulled along a stunned Jiang Zhuiying, and headed toward the minibus. As soon as the door opened, I stepped in without looking back. Drive. The engine of the minibus roared to life. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan immediately jumped into the freezer truck. Wang Chuanfu hesitated for a second, then ordered his men into their vehicles. No matter what happened, he felt following me was the right choice. Zhang Jing's expression shifted slightly. Then he said, prepare to retreat. If the situation isn't too severe, we'll come back later. In the past, he might not have listened to me, but after everything we'd been through, caution was clearly the safer bet. Right at that moment, a thunderous rumble echoed from afar. It sounded like the frantic galloping of horses. Then, suddenly, a zombie appeared at the end of the road. It spotted us from a distance, its bloodshot eyes instantly flashing with madness. It opened its blood-stained mouth wide and charged. Immediately after, roar, 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 a massive black shadow poured out from the intersection like a dark waterfall. The road was like a burst dam. Zombies flooded out endlessly. Thousands, tens of thousands, or perhaps even more. Behind them, countless other zombies climbed over the heads of their kin, letting out horrifying shrieks as they charged toward us. Everyone's faces drained of color, struck with absolute terror. Before the apocalypse, Tongnan's population was nearly 6.7 million. Based on the mutation rate provided by the starseed, at least 4.5 million people had turned into zombies, and this number would only increase, not decrease. The survivors, even those who escaped the city, never amounted to 2.2 million. Most were eaten during the initial outbreak. Zhang Jing knew zombies could cannibalize each other when food ran out. But even so, there had to be at least over 3 million left. How many of them were charging at us right now? He didn't know. He only knew that in less than a minute, the entire street was swarming with zombies. The frantic charge of the horde pounded against everyone's hearts like the drums of death. Facing such a colossal number, the soldiers holding their guns were paralyzed, their faces pale, cold sweat dripping in large beads. Against this sea of zombies, the ammo they had was like using a toothpick to stab an elephant. Drive, retreat, retreat now, Zhang Jing roared, his shout snapping everyone out of their daze. Hurry, open fire, open fire. The vehicles frantically turned around, fleeing from Tongnan City. All firepower opened up at once. But the zombies that fell were instantly trampled and buried by the ones behind them. On the wide road, facing the ever-thickening sea of zombies, the vehicles looked like ants about to be swallowed whole. One could imagine, once surrounded, nothing would be left, not even bones. Zhang Jing secretly felt lucky. Thank God they came here to clear the road and had removed most of the obstacles, leaving a clear path. Right now, that path was their lifeline. Don't panic. Retreat, in order. Zhang Jing continuously issued commands, then leaned down and told the IFV driver, "Let the trucks go first." Chu Songming's eyes widened, completely losing his cool. "Let the trucks go first? Why? We have cannons and machine guns. We should stay in the back to cover them." Zhang Jing shouted back. "Moreover, I am the commander. Cover my ass." Chu Songming screamed, his eyes bloodshot like a madman. Normally, he used the bar or tortured women to vent his anger. He had tried to hold back on this trip, only feeling a rush of pleasure when he shot that mutating soldier. But right now, the only thing occupying his mind was fear. He had never seen so many zombies before. Even when they evacuated the city, it wasn't this terrifying. He didn't want to die, and he especially didn't want to die as miserably as that unlucky soldier. "Commander," Chu Songming sneered, "if you hadn't said we needed to observe the situation, we would have retreated ages ago. Now who's the one who put the whole squad in this mess?" he yelled. "Your command was a mistake. I'm taking over command now." Zhang Jing looked at him, too shocked to speak. At this moment, Chu Songming was no different from a talking zombie. "Drive! Speed up!" he screamed into the driver's ear. Zhang Jing furiously shouted his name, but in the next second, Chu Songming drew his gun and pressed it against Zhang Jing's stomach. "If you want to be a martyr, I'm more than happy to help you." Zhang Jing trembled with rage. Chu Songming sneered, saying that even if he was reported when they got back, he wasn't afraid. His father wasn't someone to be trifled with. Even though he often scolded his son, if Chu Songming was in trouble, his father would definitely protect him. Relying on that, he became even more lawless. Seeing Zhang Jing trembling all over but unable to do anything, he only felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. The armored vehicle quickly overtook the convoy ahead, but Chu Songming still wasn't at ease. There were too many zombies. "Keep going. Speed up," he ordered. The driver, drenched in sweat, said with a trembling voice that he had already floored the gas. Chu Songming looked ahead and saw my minibus speeding incredibly fast. The freezer truck behind it and the Long US squad's off-road vehicles had all been modified. Their acceleration even surpassed the armored vehicles. A vicious glint flashed in his eyes. These survivors dare to run faster than me? Am I supposed to escort them? Deep down, Chu Songming despised survivors. Before the apocalypse, they were just poor losers, hopeless students, or office workers crushed by life. They and he were not from the same world. Yet now, he had to trail behind them? "Speed up. Faster," he screamed frantically. Right at that moment, a roar echoed. From the fields by the road, a pack of mutant beasts suddenly charged out. Mutant beasts rarely traveled in packs, yet here was an entire swarm. Squeak, squeak. Piercing screeches rang out as a horde of mutant rats rushed in at terrifying speed. There were nearly 20 of them, each about a meter long, with incisors as sharp as steel chisels. "Stop! Stop the car!" Chu Songming panicked, but inwardly felt lucky that he was in the middle of the convoy. I was in front dealing with the mutant beasts, and the military vehicles were in the back blocking the zombies. 2 mutant rats lunged straight at the minibus. Ing immediately swerved, throwing the front of the vehicle hard to one side to dodge, while Zhang Jing unleashed a powerful surge of electricity. Amidst the crackling of electricity, the 2 rats instantly convulsed. I stuck my gun out and fired, the bullets piercing their heads. But to my shock, one was still twitching. Their vitality was terrifying. The killed rat was instantly torn apart by its kin. In the blink of an eye, only white bones remained. The sight sent chills down everyone's spines. If that were a human, what would be the outcome? Chu Songming looked ahead, then glanced back. Delayed like this, the zombies would close in very quickly. Just then, a mutant rat latched onto the freezer truck, its teeth sinking straight into the steel, its claws scraping with a harsh screech. My minibus suddenly slammed on the brakes, drifting sideways and knocking the rat far away. Its teeth broke, and it was covered in blood, but it still lunged again. I shot it right in the mouth. The bullet pierced through, blood spraying from the back of its head, and the rat collapsed, twitching. "Are you guys okay?" Jiang Zhuing asked Zhang Hai and the others in the truck. Why did they turn back? Chu Songming was stunned. In this situation, they should have just charged straight through to escape the encirclement. But he would never let the armored vehicle take the lead. He only wanted to tail the survivors. Yet I had turned around to save the freezer truck. Going back and forth like this would waste so much time. Didn't I know the zombies were closing in? In Chu Songming's mind, there was only one curse. Idiot. If they had just left the truck behind as bait, they would have escaped already. Right then, an off-road vehicle from the Longhua squad, after struggling with 2 mutant rats, frantically turned around and fled toward the armored vehicle. The faces inside were pale as they screamed, "We can't hold them off. Give us cover." The armored vehicle had machine guns and cannons. In their desperation, they could only beg for help. Chu Songming's pupils shrank. Damn it! These idiots are dragging the rat pack toward me. Chu Songming had witnessed the destructive power of the mutant rat pack firsthand. They could bite through thick steel, while the armor of the IFV was only average, completely insufficient to withstand them. And their speed was incredibly fast, charging like blurs. His face darkened significantly. There were too many rats. If they kept getting stalled here, the zombie horde behind would quickly catch up. Right then, he adjusted the automatic cannon's barrel in a different direction. I was aiming at the rat pack when I suddenly felt a wave of danger approaching. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out, followed immediately by the starseed's warning alarm in my head. Tire number 4 damaged. Damage level, 60%. My heart sank. The tire was damaged, and it was the most severe level of damage. Ever since I got this vehicle, the base car's tires were made of bulletproof materials. Even machine guns would struggle to cause such heavy damage. The only possible cause was an automatic cannon. At that moment, the IFV sped past the minibus at high speed. Chu Songming knew my marksmanship was deadly accurate. Hiding inside the armored vehicle, out of my line of sight, he believed he was safe. The automatic cannon fired a burst of 5 rounds. They didn't all need to hit. Destroying a tire was enough. The smell of gunpowder and burning rubber spread. A cold smirk flashed across his eyes. If I refused to use the freezer truck to block the path, then I could leave my own minibus behind to cover the rear. This tough vehicle should be able to hold out for a while. The explosion drew the attention of the mutant rat pack. The minibus jerked, the tires screeching harshly against the road as its speed dropped. "What the hell are you doing?" Zhang Jing roared furiously. Chu Songming glanced at him calmly. "Look at the situation. If we keep fighting this rat pack, do you think we'll make it back to Zhonghai alive?" "Everything I just saw will be reported," Zhang Jing said. Suddenly, he felt his waist lighten. His gun had been taken by Chu Songming. Zhang Jing turned his head and saw that the minibus and the freezer truck had come to a complete stop, nearly surrounded by the rats, while the zombie horde behind them surged forward like a tsunami. The vehicle stopped on the road, completely defenseless against that black sea of zombies. "Brother Jiang." The military vehicles sped past one by one. Shindao stuck his head out and yelled, but was quickly pulled back inside. Zhang Hai gritted his teeth and cursed, staring at the destroyed tire. Ren Xiu stumbled with the vehicle's jolt, unable to believe the armored vehicle was leaving them behind. Only now did she truly feel Chu Songming's murderous intent. He had hidden it too well. Jiang Zhuing suddenly erupted with intense killing intent, her eyes flashing blue-white as electricity surged through her. The rats kept lunging. Firepower alone couldn't hold them off for long. The minibus was fine, only losing a tire, its hull unbreached. But the freezer truck was quickly being torn apart. "Get in my car," I shouted. Ing slammed the gas, swinging the front of the vehicle to the side, opening the door facing the freezer truck. The alarm was still blaring. Tire number 4 was in critical condition. One damaged tire caused the speed to drop drastically, while we had been delayed for too long and were completely surrounded by the rat pack. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan scrambled into the minibus. The moment the door closed, a squeak sounded from behind. A mutant rat had managed to get into the freezer truck, tearing through the metal like tofu. In the blink of an eye, It destroyed the driver's cabin. The sight made both of them break out in a cold sweat. What now? The bus was bulletproof, but it could only hold out for so long. Even if we managed to hold on, the zombie horde behind us was closing in. Their gruesome faces were already visible, and the smell of fresh blood made them run even faster. Hold on tight, I said in a deep voice. Before Zhang Hai could even understand, he felt his line of sight gradually rising. Before he could react, a loud boom echoed. The vehicle shot forward. Crash, smash, bang. The rats were continuously sent flying, blood splattering and dyeing the windows red. A blood-soaked rat still lunged and clung tightly to the window. ZZZZT. Electricity flashed. The rat instantly stiffened and fell off the vehicle. The vehicle continued to accelerate. Rin Xiu realized they were at a height of 4 to 5 meters. Looking down from above, the abandoned vehicles were all knocked aside. Is this your special ability? Sun Kuan asked, both amazed and overjoyed. I nodded. Lock onto the front. Despite the delay, we hadn't fallen too far behind the military. Once we broke through the rat pack, the military convoy appeared ahead. Ram straight through, I said coldly. Everyone could tell that this calm demeanor hid a rage boiling like a volcano. Virum. The terrifying roar of the mining truck echoed as it charged forward, reaching Chu Songming's ears. He turned his head, his eyes bulging. What the hell is charging at us? The mining truck weighed 160 tons and was as tall as a 2-story building. Speeding down the highway, it created a breathtakingly terrifying scene. In the age of dinosaurs, the Seismosaurus, the earth-shaking lizard, weighed about 40 tons. This truck was equivalent to 4 giant dinosaurs galloping at full speed simultaneously. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the wheels rolled over, the road surface seemed unable to bear the terrifying weight. If it were a normal mining truck, it couldn't go fast. But after being scanned by the Starseed and converted into the base car's second form, this vehicle was completely different. It could reach nearly 100 kilometers per hour when unloaded, and could even activate acceleration and ramming modes. Of course, every activation consumed fuel at a horrifying rate, like burning diesel directly. But the mining truck had a 10 cubic meter reserve tank, plus 4,000 liters in the main tank, a total of 12 tons of diesel. Enough for me to make several round trips between Zhonghai and Tongnan. The engine roared like thunder. A mutant rat was swept under the wheels. The tires, over 2 meters high, crushed it in an instant, leaving not a single trace of flesh or bone. Sun Kuan and Zhang Hai were completely dumbfounded. Sitting in the cabin, they had no idea what kind of vehicle they were in, but just looking at the size and hearing the engine was enough to understand its sheer terror. Ing gripped the steering wheel tightly, her cold eyes locked on the road ahead. The distance to the military convoy was rapidly shrinking. I opened the cabin door and stepped outside. On the side of the mining truck was a ladder leading to a standing platform. It was the perfect sniper position. Damn it, what the hell is that? Chu Songming was in full panic mode. The massive vehicle almost took up the entire highway. The mutant rat pack, the zombies blocking the road. Everything was crushed without the slightest resistance. How is this possible? Where did he get this vehicle? He hadn't seen the bus transform, so he instinctively assumed I had switched vehicles. But the idea of a transforming vehicle was beyond his imagination. Surrounded by the rat pack, where would I find the time to switch cars? Moreover, a vehicle that huge parked by the road couldn't possibly go unnoticed. His mind was in chaos, even doubting his own memory. Speed up, Chu Songming barked. The massive truck behind them was running faster than the armored vehicle, the distance closing in. The IFV driver was sweating profusely. The post-apocalyptic roads were full of obstacles, and the top speed of a Type 92 IFV was only about 85 kilometers per hour. Even pushed to the limit, it couldn't go any faster. Shoot. Take that truck down, Chu Songming roared. But none of the soldiers moved, because he wasn't the commander. The one with the authority to give orders was Zhang Jing. Earlier, they had listened to him and fled out of fear of the zombie sea. But now, telling them to fire at my vehicle? They all hesitated. Chu Songming went mad, shoved a soldier aside, and manned the automatic cannon himself. The 25mm cannon of the Type 92 IFV used armor-piercing rounds, powerful enough to pierce light tanks. Against a mining truck, A single burst would be enough to destroy it. He swiveled the barrel, preparing to fire. A gunshot rang out. The sniper bullet hit the automatic cannon dead on. Under the firepower of the AMR-2, the IFV's armor was as thin as paper, instantly torn apart. An IFV wasn't a tank. Its armor could only stop assault rifle bullets, let alone anti-tank sniper rounds. With just one shot, the cannon was disabled. I immediately chambered the second round. The machine gun next to the cannon was also destroyed. In the blink of an eye, the Type 92 IFV was like a tiger stripped of its fangs and claws. If any soldier opened the hatch or used a firing port now, I could easily shoot them down before they could react. I loaded the third round. Through the scope, I could clearly see the rear of the IFV, where the spades and pioneer tools were hung. If I pulled the trigger, the bullet would pierce the armor, destabilize inside the cabin, and turn it into a slaughterhouse. But I didn't fire. The one who shot my bus tire was Chu Songming. Zhang Jing and the other soldiers weren't involved. I wouldn't let Chu Songming off, but I wasn't a homicidal maniac either. By now, the mining truck had left the sea of zombies far behind. No matter how ferocious they were, they only had 2 legs. They couldn't outrun a vehicle. Even the mutant rat pack gradually gave up. For now, everyone was safe. Rin Shiyu, can you project your voice into the armored vehicle? I asked. After her ability evolved, the range of her mental transmission had increased significantly. Let me try, she nodded. Tell them to stop the vehicle, or I will attack. I said coldly. After a long time in the apocalypse, killing countless zombies and quite a few people, a freezing, murderous aura had formed around me, something that previously only belonged to blood-soaked mercenaries. Stop the vehicle immediately. Lower your weapons, or you will be attacked. Rin Shiyu's voice rang out, transmitting directly into the armored vehicle, echoing clearly in the minds of Zhang Jing and Chu Songming.